Hi folks, Chris again with the VK3AML stream for the 5th of February 2022. This is a kind of a ham radio tradition in the Melbourne area, which was initially established by Tony Sanderson, my predecessor, with my call. VK3AML also, he had that call from 1967 to his death in 2006. The tradition was carried on Saturday nights for many years by Dave Stewart, VK3ASC, and in due course he's looking to get an HF broadcasting license for about to the 2.3 megahertz region. And he may succeed, and let's look to see what comes of that. But at the moment I seem to be filling the Saturday night spot. It's 9:29, we usually start at 9:30 on the air via that radio. And hopefully this week the audio will be just that little bit better. We've got a new audio peak limiter in the rack to my left, and I've taken care to set it up with the right levels this time. Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima from Burwood East with the regular Saturday night live stream and test transmission on 147.475. If you want to look in on the video components that we'll be sending out with the audio, please do Google VK3AML 5 February 2022. That's VK3AML 5 February 2022, and that should bring you to the video on the live stream, 1080p video. Quite a week. My wife and I have been out and about for a change, looking at old stamping grounds of my wife. She originally was from the Elwood area, inner city, Bayside. And we went down to St Kilda for the first time in about 6 months, and were rather shocked by what we saw. I took a few photographs, and I'll show you these. There are closed businesses, empty shops, few patrons. And about 1 shop in 5 in Ackland Street has closed. Here's the Palais Theatre, but no people. Luna Park, but no people. Just 1 or 2. Everything bolted and barred. This is the result of people being sufficiently scared. They're now locking themselves down, and a telephoto shot up Ackland Street reveals very few people milling about. Cafes had decks for street tables, rarely used. Readings was open, but few patrons, and 3 shops to the south of Readings were closed. Looking down Ackland Street, you could almost shoot a gun down there without hitting anybody. That you couldn't say 6 months ago. And the trams were gliding up and down with seldom more than 1 patron per tram. The cake shops were still there, slightly lower amount of stock and very much fewer takers in the way of buyers. This is a weekday. This was Thursday at lunchtime. You would think it'd be crowded. No way. St Kilda has changed. The old St Kilda Army and Navy hall. Even the phone care clinic has closed. The old Devroli's, who's now operating under a different name, is still open and has some business going. But really, even the car parks, you would expect to be able to get a car park with trouble in the old days. However, we moved across to Fairfield, and there, in the suburban block of Fairfield, quite a bit of business was going on. I'm told the problem lies in the southern suburbs. This is a picture of the compressor, the top one in that photo that we've just put into operation. It's about half the size of the compressor that we borrowed previously from VK3BK. That's a close-up of one channel on the compressor, and it took quite a bit of setting up, but that's the approximate setting we have it on at the moment. So hopefully the audio this week will be one little bit better than it has been on previous occasions, with more regular audio levels as a result of the peak limiter being in circuit. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Well, the coverage I made of the pirate Ukrainian transmissions being put out on 4625 kilohertz on top of the so-called Russian buzzer last week got quite a bit of feedback. So what I'll do is I'll show you the update just to bring you into the picture with what's going there. This diagram of the Ukraine shows how many battalions of Russian troops are poised on the border for a potential invasion should Ukraine decide to go with NATO. Unfortunately, Ukraine is a divided country. The red area is where Ukrainian speakers live, but to the east the sympathies are predominantly Russian. And this is the problem, that it's a nation divided in its attitude to Russia, and Russia has all these tanks sitting on the border, about 1,200 tanks, I think. Boris Johnson made the best of it for his own prime ministership by appearing to be a peacemaker, but I remain a bit cynical about that. And meanwhile, the civilians of the Ukraine are frequently arming. Here are waterfall images transmitted over the top of the Russian buzzer, and you'll see there the call sign of the pirate group. That apparently translates to something in the order of UB-676, Russian Bay of Freedom. Ukrainian Bay of Freedom. Gosh, that was a slip. But they're using Australian EasyPower software to generate these waterfall pictures that actually appear on your screen when you tune in on any web-based SDR. In this particular occasion, I was tuning in through a web-SDR in southeastern Germany. The Ukrainian pirates are also using slow scan TV. And announcing their slow scan, which in due course you'll see. I fired up the slow scan software a little bit late. And unfortunately that picture didn't complete in time, but it was actually a picture of a guy holding a Kalashnikov. And here, as you see it scanning down at the moment, death playing chess with an old Ukrainian woman. I guess these pictures have their symbolic significance. There were quite a few slow scan pictures transmitted, and it was interesting that I was able to demodulate them off the web audio stream. Another picture in Robot 36 mode. Again, I was demodulating these with the output of an Upper Bavarian Forest web-SDR over a distance of something like 500 kilometres from where this was being transmitted in the Ukraine. And I don't quite know the translation of that. Perhaps some kind Ukrainian fluent person can actually tell me at some stage on the text feedback on this live stream. This is VK3AML testing with the usual Saturday night live stream and audio on 147.475. Another slow scan peak. And this is a guy hiding in an alcove, and he's holding a rifle, as you see there. I guess this could be a background to the preparations the Ukrainians are making. Pictures are rather distorted by the 500-kilometer path that they've had to travel. Then we saw waterfall images of text. Aboba is apparently the pirate group in the Ukraine that's responsible for these jamming transmissions. And then, in double speed, please note, I managed to demodulate these pictures of Guy Fawkes masks, the international symbol of protest. They transmitted the Guy Fawkes mask on the waterfall display several times. I haven't seen this used as a means of propaganda ever before, but the usage of waterfall displays on HF receivers is a fairly obvious new mode of communication, I guess, and it was devised by Eric Sundstrup, VK3AML, with his Easy PAL software. Another Ukrainian attempt at jamming the digital signal from Russia. The smiling face, transmitted by the Aboba group. It's actually transmitted by keying on and off 64 carriers all at the same time to actually scan out letters and images. And that image is the trident, the coat of arms of the state of the Ukraine. Again being transmitted over the top of the Russian transmission. Several times over. And notice that they're varying the audio frequency of the jamming too. Quite clever, putting the Russian trident symbol over the top. Now, let's have a look at the actual images transmitted, and please, these images may be offensive, so parental discretion needed for any children watching these. Keep them out of the room. As this is exactly what I demodulated off the pirate signals on the Russian buzzer by the Ukrainian group, and needless to say, they're not backward in coming forward with giving the Russians the finger would be the best description. I think the only description. Some of these pictures were rather difficult to decipher. A picture of a man being tortured by having his mouth pulled open. A cadaver head, a rather creepy picture of a monster looking out through a window, an ape looking at a mushroom. I don't know what this is supposed to be. I hope somebody can tell me, actually. The nude backside is apparently holding up a monster head, but I'm not sure. Some of these are quite clever in their montage. A spider hanging from an eyelash. Somebody banging nails into a man's head. I won't even start to describe that. All of that. But these are all demodulated in the course of an afternoon of listening on a web-SDR with the MMSS TV software demodulating on the Ukrainian transmissions. Bizarrely fascinating, a country under siege. Of course, Boris Yeltsin or the Russians would probably debate that they're under siege, but that's more the nature of the situation. An evil clown, a monster head, I think. All rather creepy, all this stuff, and that particularly is a nasty one. And that was their politician who died of radioactive poisoning, I think. Not sure what the cat symbolism is all about. That's the picture of the guy with the Kalashnikov, ready to defend his country. Frightening. Well, that's an update on the Ukrainian HF pirate situation. If anybody else has been monitoring 4625 kilohertz and has seen anything else of significance, perhaps you should email me. My email is VK3AML @optusnet.com.au. That's VK3AML @optusnet.com.au. OPTUSNET. This is VK3AML with the regular Saturday night test transmission. Now, a more pleasant task is to open up the discussion, continuing last week's theme of a review of prominent Victorian radio hams YouTube channels. And I hope that by showing these sample clips from these various YouTube channels, nobody will be offended, and people will be induced to look further into these channels. But they're increasing in number as time goes on, and some of them are very good indeed, full broadcast quality, unlike my efforts here. And the first of these I'd like you to direct you to is the YouTube channel of Craig Meddings, VK3CRG. He's based in Lara, down near Geelong. He has been a broadcast engineer for 3BA and 3GL in times gone by, and now a senior tech at ATV Channel 10 television. So I suppose we should expect something rather professional, and we weren't disappointed. This is Craig's introductory video, and then a bit of video of him on a field day. Craig Meddings, VK3CRG, and if you look underneath the stored YouTube clip I'm recording at the moment, once it's all up to the YouTube, you'll see the link for Craig Meddings' YouTube site below the image I have here. Craig Meddings, VK3CRG.
Hi there, and thank you for dropping by my YouTube channel. My name's Craig, and I hold Australian Advanced Amateur Radio Licence VK3CRG. I'm also a Wireless Institute of Australia accredited licence assessor. My main interest in the hobby is portable HF operation, and a lot of the videos on my YouTube channel are about just that. Taking my radios down to the beach or down to the park, setting up my buddy pole antenna and seeing how we go. If you're interested in an HF portable antenna system, you might want to check out the buddy pole, or you might already be considering it. Then have a look at some of the videos on my page and I'll show you just how well that works. I also operate an IRLP node in my home QTH of Lara, just out of Geelong in Victoria, Australia. That's IRLP node 6789 and Echolink node 79555, which covers Lara and most of the Geelong area. If you'd like any more details, you can check out my website, vk3crg.net, or if you'd like info on my IRLP and Echolink node, that has a website too, irlpnode.net. 73 from Craig, VK3CRG.
Hello YouTubers, Craig VK3VCM here. Set up portable today
I often set up portable, as you're probably aware if you've seen some of my other videos. And today I'm here in Maribyrnong in Melbourne at a rather nice park. And it's a beautiful day, about 25, 26 degrees Celsius, and very nice indeed. So I thought, well, there's not much wind about. It's nice outside, it's not too hot, not too cold. So let's do a bit of portable HF today. To go portable, if you're interested in doing so, there are obviously some things which you'll need, and it's best to sort of build yourself up a pack over time. I've sort of got myself a couple of these plastic type containers here, which are available very cheaply. I get them from the reject shop here in Australia, but in the US and places like that, you'll get them from Best Buy, you'll get them from Walmart, you'll get them very, very cheap. I've seen them when I've been in the States in places like that for maybe $4 or $5. This one's actually got wheels on it, which is good, so you can sort of move it around easily, and holds quite a bit of stuff, and has a lid that seals on top, and they also stack as well. So a lot of stuff goes in there. I pack things like my headset, my handheld radio, and a few other things in there. Okay, well, to go portable, first of all, obviously you'll need a radio. As you can see here, I've got myself a Kenwood TS590, which is a very nice radio. It's brand new. Obviously it's only been on the market for a month or two, and it's quite a good size for going portable. It is a heavy radio. It is very well built, but it's also very it's not like a huge bass type radio. It is a medium-sized radio, so that's a good size to take out and about. Next thing you'll need is a headset if you can. It can be very hard to hear out of the speaker of the radio, especially if there's people around you or a bit of wind noise or whatever. So this is obviously a good idea. Something like the Hale Pro Set 5, which I have here. As you'll see, it has cloth removable ear pads, which you can just take off and throw in the washing machine, because there are leatherette or leather ear pads underneath, but they tend to get a bit sweaty when it's a bit warm or when you wear them for a while. So very comfortable headset there. Something else which you'll need if you're going to use a headset is an adapter, obviously, for your radio. As you can see, I've got the red Hale adapter there. Red is for Kenwood, so I've got that there. And also you'll need a way of activating push to talk. Now you can do it, there's numerous ways you can do it. You can do that with an activator switch, whether it be a hand switch or a foot switch, or you can in fact do it with Vox if you prefer to do that. If you're in a park though, Vox can sometimes be a little bit hard, because if there's noise behind you, kids playing or whatever, it can activate it accidentally.
VK3, Victor Charlie, Mike Portable, VK7F
Yeah, VK7F VK3 VCM. Just got the video camera on now. I'm going to make a YouTube video just on operating portable and what my experiences on it. So if you don't mind, I might whack part of your QSO on it, if that's all right with you there, Scott. I'll ask you to let me know when I come back. But you might also want to see your own signal here in Melbourne anyway.
Yeah, Victor Kilo 3, Victor Charlie, Mike Portable, Victor Kilo 7F Very good. Great, no problem with that at all, mate. You need to promote the hobby. It's a fantastic thing. Now, I reckon we've spoken before, actually, Craig, in Deary May. I reckon it's been about maybe 4 months ago. Too easy, mate. Yeah, I did have it. I just thought it was a bit short, but that's too easy. Oh, mate, all the best for the year. The 7-3. Hope you had a good Christmas. Sounds like you have. Great stuff working portable like that. It kind of takes the hobby to that next little level, and you get that open air stuff in your lungs as well while you're out there, so that's a good thing. Cheers, mate. Catch you next time. VK3AML Portable Maribyrnong 7-3, mate. VK7F We're clear on your final, mate. Cheers.
Because in the park, Vox is not really the best option usually. I've got two options. First of all is a push-to-talk button, such as this, which is really just a momentary contact switch with a 6.5mm mono plug on the end, and when you push the button, it just shorts the two contacts together. Or same sort of thing, but this time a foot pedal. Just a foot pedal switch. which is very, very easy to make. The foot pedal is about $20 from an electronics store. Here in Australia, I got this from J-Car Electronics, but you can also get them online as well. Just have to make sure it's the type with a contact switch in it. This had push on or push off in there, so it was a switch I could select. So obviously I want this to activate when I press it, so that's what I've done. And here on the Kenwood connector down here, you've got a couple of different connections on the Hale connector. You've got the microphone connector, which is this one here. That's the microphone connector. You've got the headphone connector, which goes straight into the radio, and the push-to-talk connector as well. So very simple, and I just place this on the ground and put my foot on it, and it transmits. So nice and simple, about $20. And that switch in the box, the switch I think was about $3, and the box was about the same, and just a little bit of cable. Doesn't have to be high current or high voltage or anything like that, obviously, and a little connector on the end, and away you go. So very, very simple to activate, and a lot easier than using Vox in the park with this wind noise and people around you making noise as well. And I quite like the idea of the foot switch. If you're going to go out portable with your radio, it's very important that you protect it, especially something like a Kenwood or a Yaesu, like an expensive radio, like the TS590. You're looking at about $2,500 Australian. So you do want to look after it. It's a nice portable radio. It's not huge, but it is a good idea to take it in something like this case here, which is like a Pelican case, or it's a cheaper version thereof. It has very, very sturdy locks here that you can see that actually snap lock. It has a control here to actually expel the air, purge the air from the case, and what that does is allow it to actually seal properly so water can't get in. And you'll notice here too, if I flip open the lid, there's actually cutaway foam rubber there, if I can get into the light properly, where you can actually cut out sections for the radio so it fits in nice and snugly, and the roof here of the case is foam rubber as well. Very, very sturdy. Once the radio's in there, it's extremely well protected, and yeah, definitely a good idea if you're going to take your expensive base radio out and about. This case here is about $130. Operating portable is a whole lot of fun. It's even more fun if you plan the day ahead. If you organise things ahead, you won't forget things. There won't be a last SSTV, while portable, it's not impossible. Get yourself a netbook like this one here, which is about $400 Australian, a little bit less. Battery life is about 10 hours, 10 to 11 hours, depending on how you use it. If you turn off things like Wi-Fi, etc., which you won't need in the park, you'll get longer battery life out of it, and Bluetooth, etc. You don't need those. As you can see, I've just taken a picture of myself. The camera I'm using now, a Canon high-definition video camera, also takes snapshots. I took a picture of myself, and I've created this in MMSSTV, which is a free program, of course. This Signal Link Pro box actually connects directly into the back of the radio, into the accessory port, and also into the computer down here, into the USB. It gets its power from the USB, and that, of course, is also the data connection to the computer. So all I do is to send SSTV, I get onto the right frequency, which in this case is 14.230. It's a data mode, so I've actually selected data on the radio there, and or you can use upper sideband, and then it's simply a matter of just hitting the transmit button on the actual computer, which I'll do over here, and away we go. You'll see that there's a scan line going down the picture there. That is actually transmitting that picture. You'll see that the Signal Link USB, as the PTT is on. That's a good thing about this box. It actually automatically controls the push to talk. The radio is transmitting. It's in red, and you can actually see on the meter there, it's actually putting out RF power. Something to remember when you're using SSTV is make sure your radio is not on full output power. You will probably cook your final stage of your radio because it is 100% duty cycle. It's not like speech. If I go into my menu here, you'll see my power is on 90. This is a 100 watt radio. Give it a little bit of headroom like that, and you won't be in danger of cooking the output stage of your radio. It's almost finished sending now. If I go to my picture, in fact it has finished, just heard the radio come back there. Now if someone decides to send something back to me, the Signal Link USB will automatically pass that onto my computer and it will come up on my screen. So it's not impossible to do digital modes and SSTV while portable, especially now that netbooks are around. They're fast, they're portable, the batteries last a long time, and they definitely allow you to operate portable while doing digital modes.
I'll just pause that there to say this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the usual Saturday night test transmission, and we're currently looking at a video made by Craig Meddings, now VK3CRG. He had a different call at that stage, and this is made about 11 years ago when netbooks were relatively new. But it surprises me how few people actually bother to try doing slow scan out in the field. It's something that demands more attention, I think, transmitting from remote locales, pictures as well as audio. Back to Craig Meddings, VK3CRG, talking about field operation.
Thinking on doing HF in the park, especially with a tuned antenna like a buddy pole, you definitely need one of these, an antenna analyzer. They're about $300 or $400 and they are worth every cent. If you're not sure how to use an analyzer, I can show you in just a moment. Very simple to use, and they basically tell you very quickly with no messing about where your antenna is resonant, and you basically know if you're ready to go or not. They also help you very quickly set up an antenna like the Buddy Pole Deluxe, which I'll show you very shortly as well. So you can't go past one of these. That would be the most useful thing I have in my shack. This one here covers all of the HF bands up to 2 meters and goes up to 170 meg, so it does cover 2 meters as well. You can also get the next model up, which covers up to the 70 centimeter band in UHF as well. Definitely worth getting, not a waste of money, and you will use this all the time, trust me. Well worth investing in something like this. Alright, it's a little bit windy out here, hopefully it's not too bad, but here is my Buddy Pole Deluxe antenna. Obviously, if you're going to operate portable, you can't cart around a huge dipole antenna that's, 100 feet long. It's impractical, it's ridiculous. You do have to compromise with an antenna, and the Buddy Pole is a good compromise if it fits into your budget, and if you want a good antenna that will last you for years if you treat it properly, and works on all bands if you can take the time to tune it up. What we have here, first of all, we'll start at the bottom, is a nice big tripod. That is a big tripod, let me tell you. It may not look big, but it is. If I then work my way up the tripod, or up the mast I should say, this is 20 feet, this mast, or thereabouts, a little bit more. Up the top I have what's called a TRSB, which is a triple ratio switched balun, and what that does, it is a 1-to-1, a 4-to-1 and a 2-to-1 balun, and you basically switch it for the lowest SWR. I have it on 2-to-1 because that tends to work with the dipole. There's also tuning coils, which you can see here. They allow you to match the antenna or set it up for the bands that you're going to use it on. So I have this currently set up for 40. Very good antenna system. You'll notice here I have a guide. There's a guying kit that comes with it. You must do that. Even if it's not windy when you first put it up, guaranteed it will be when you least expect it. The thing will flip over and you'll break your antenna. These two extendable arms here are quite long. Again, they don't look it, but they are extendable whips, and there's one on either side. Very easy to tune, and I'll be going through that fairly shortly with you. Operating from the park is a lot of fun. Operating portable is a lot of fun. However, you'll also need some power, obviously, to run your radio. Now, if you're operating QRP, that's fine. Normally very easy. You just need a small sealed lead acid battery and that'll do the job. If you're running 100 watts like I am, you'll need something a little bit meatier than that. Behind this solar panel, I have a 120 amp hour sealed lead acid battery, which looks like a car battery, except it's non-spillable, which is very important. You don't want any acid burns, acid spills. You don't want any of that. This solar panel is a 200 watt solar panel, which keeps it topped up very nicely. Now, something very important to consider, you don't just go out and buy any old solar panel, you'll also need a charge controller. Now, the charge controller is a bit like a traffic policeman. If it monitors the battery level. If the battery gets too low, it will direct current from the panels into the battery. If the battery is topped up nicely, it will actually direct some of the energy from the panels into the radio and save the battery. So very important to remember that a radio like the TS590 draws about 22 amps when it's running at 100 watts. So what you need to make sure of is that your charge controller can actually handle that sort of current. I have a 30 amp charge controller on the back of this. It's basically a small unit with an LCD screen that you program and say, if the battery falls below this level, start charging. When it gets to this level, stop charging, and it basically just keeps the battery nicely topped up. Also good, of course, if you can operate from a shaded area such as this. While being out in the sun is very nice, especially in countries like here in Australia, you'll end up sunburnt in no time at all. And of course you've got to watch skin cancer and all the rest of it. So safety first, but something like this, which is a small fold-out solar panel, which folds up to half the size of that and even has a carry handle on the left-hand side there. Something like this will keep you running all day at 100 watts on a nice sunny day like this. As I mentioned before, the BuddyPole Deluxe is a great antenna system if you're looking at going portable and doing HF with amateur radio. It folds up into this tiny bag here, which is about 4 feet long, which isn't bad for an antenna that extends up to about 22 feet. And I imagine is probably about 8 to 10 metres wide, depending on the band that you're operating on. What we're going to do next is have a look at actually tuning the antenna. Obviously, if there's no need for a tuner, if you've tuned up the antenna for the band you're operating on, then all your RF goes up into the antenna, and it doesn't all go into a tuner and is wasted. So remember that because the antenna is a compromise, you will hopefully try and get as much RF into the stick as you can and not into your tuner and waste it. Because when you're operating portable, every bit of power counts. Even when you're running 100 watts, that's power that you're draining out of your battery and taking out of your solar panels. So if you can get that into get that steam in the beam, as the old saying goes, it will turn out to be a much better signal on air. And of course your receiving will also be much better as well. The BuddyPole is now down on the ground, well, lowered. This is the triple ratio switched balun. I'll just zoom in a little bit on it so you can actually see it. You'll notice here it's got three-way switch, a 1-to-1, 2-to-1 and a 4-to-1. For a dipole like this, it's normally best to put it on 2-to-1. It seems to give the lowest SWR. It's good because it isolates the radio from it tends to stop radiating from the coax, etc. So it works very well, and definitely worth buying if you do get yourself a BuddyPole antenna. So I'll zoom back from there. The antenna itself, let's have a bit of a look at it while it's here on the lower down on the ground. It's quite big, probably hard to tell. To adjust the antenna, you can do two things. You can either adjust the length of the whips. Those whips at the end do extend. There's the tripod there. But the best way to adjust it, I found, is just extend the whips fully and then do this. The BuddyPole coils actually are attached by these little hooks here that hook underneath the wire. And what happens is, if you can see on this side, it's a bit hard for me to actually operate the camera, but you can see here that it actually hooks in to the wire. It's got a little hook, and then when you get it to the right spot, you just tighten it up like there. These are a banana type connection that just hooks and connects you to the right part of the coil. These hooks are a great idea. They allow you to adjust the antenna very easily. All you do is slide the antenna hook along until the SWR is the lowest, and then you do the same with the other end of the antenna, and you're pretty much tuned up. So we'll have a look on the antenna analyzer where this antenna sits and where it's resonant. Hopefully it's around 40 meters. Let's have a look where we're up to here. If I turn this, you'll notice the SWR is lowest at about 7.12 megahertz, and it's 1-to-1. That's exactly what we want, right in the middle of the 40-metre band. Now remember, when you put the antenna up, the SWR will alter very slightly, but you do get used to this, and it's very easy to adjust. As you put the antenna up, the sweet point on the antenna, or the resonant sweet point, goes up as well. So it's very easy to do. When we put the antenna up, it may be a little bit higher than this, but that won't really matter because we can tune that out. It's only a small adjustment anyway. The antenna's just been put back up, and I've got it, as you can see. The guy wires are strings actually. They just go into the ground, like over here, and very easy to all roll up. And it all rolls up into that tiny little bag over there. The tripod, the antennas, everything, even the coax. It's a great package from Buddy Pole. I don't work for Buddy Pole. I don't get any money from Buddy Pole, but Buddy Pole antennas, buddypole.com, is definitely worth looking at if you're interested in operating HF.
Oh, advertising content, my apologies. Now I'll say they're horrible. I'll continue, but oh dear, I should have listened a little bit closer before I edited this. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, YouTube live streaming as well as testing on 147.475. Back to the video.
You can fit that whole antenna into a small bag like this and walk away with it. It's a fantastic system. You can also make verticals. You can make all sorts of antennas with that. It isn't just a dipole system. And also I've got 80-metre coils as well, so it can work on the lower bands. Very good system. It is, as I said, a compromise. That's the camera tripod. It is a compromise, but it's a great system if you do want to work portable. Something to remember when going off the Buddy Pole: you don't need these strings to be too tight. They're simply to stop the mast from falling over. They're not designed to hold the tower up. You're not holding up an AM broadcast tower. There is a base at the bottom of the tripod. There is a tripod base that does in fact hold it up. These just stop it from falling over. Don't forget to safety first. Make sure that you put the mast out in a position where people won't trip over the guying, or they won't also trip over the cable that leads back to your radio. Make sure you tie off the end of the cable as well, so if someone does trip over the cable, it doesn't pull your radio off the bench and you end up with a very expensive mess.
And I'll add there, having done a field day just recently, if you're trailing your coax across the ground, or indeed have guy wires, if you can manage it, something bright orange that people won't trip over is a good idea. Black doesn't show up terribly well, and God help us if we ever use green against foliage. VK3AML, back to the video.
73s, and if I don't catch up with you before the new year, Happy New Year, and happy DXing. Back to you, VK3 VCM, portable 2, portable VK1 Mike Alpha Tango, portable 2. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for you. It should be good to catch up again in various different locations. So yeah, no worries, Craig, and hope you have a good new year, and best wishes to yourself and the family. So yeah, I'll call it there, and thanks very much for the QSO. VK1 MAT going clear after your next over.
Yeah, roger there, Matt. No worries at all. And yeah, I'll fire you off a card as well. That's no problems at all. VK1 MAT portable 2, VK3 VCM portable 73s, Matt. And I might even talk to you tomorrow because I'll certainly be out and about, I'd say. See you then, 73s.
Yeah, 73s, Craig.
One of the reasons you might want to work portable is the fact that you live in an apartment like myself. Now, what I do to make things a whole lot easier for myself is I've got myself a platform trolley like this. That allows me to carry everything I need. My box of goodies, radio, battery fits on the front. Everything fits on this trolley in one go, so I can get into the lift or the elevator, go down in one go, and it saves multiple trips up and down. That can be a real pain, and also it saves your back from straining yourself, and it just makes life generally a whole lot easier. They're about $30 or $40 a platform trolley. The handle folds down, and it's certainly a very good investment if you're going to operate portable like I do, and you want to run full power, 100 watts while you're out in the park. If you're operating with a backpack and maybe 5 watts, then it's not so much of a big deal. But if you're going to run full power, you're going to need something like this to carry all your stuff. You won't drop it. You won't drop your battery or your radio, and you can carry everything all at once. It's a great idea. Another thing to consider when you're operating portable is make sure, if you can, that there's water available, or bring yourself some drinks, because you won't stay out very long, especially if it's a warm day, without something to drink. You'll also need, it goes without saying, that if you're going to spend the afternoon at the park, human needs need to be taken care of, including a toilet. It's nice to have a toilet nearby as well. I've got a web page which is VK3VCM.net, VK3VictorCharlieMike.net, and you'll see my little portable setup, and I'm also on QRZ as well. But yeah, also if you've got YouTube, if you go to Craig3008, that's where my videos will be.
Well, actually, the videos are now under Craig VK3CRG since he upgraded and changed his call sign. That's Craig VK3CRG, Craig Meddings. Just back to finish this video.
And yeah, I'm actually doing some filming at the moment of just in portable operation and stuff, so I'm going to make a YouTube video. So you might even be a star on YouTube there. VK7 FMTX VK3 VCM Portable.
Yeah, sounds like yeah, I might be on YouTube. Very good. Yeah, I've watched a few of those YouTube videos of radio equipment, guys working radio and whatnot. So yeah, it's always very informative, good for learning, you know, about different radios, antennas, how signals coming in from different places, whatnot. So you get a good idea of things.
Operating portable is a whole lot of fun. It's even more fun if you plan ahead, work out what you'll need before you go, and don't do it on the spur of the moment. Get yourself a pack, put it in that box like I showed you. You can then put it on your trolley and cart everything to your location all in one go. If you plan it the night before, you won't forget things. It's no good if you come out to the park and you forget your battery, or you forget your power cable for your radio, or the connector that allows you to fit the BNC plug from the buddy pole into the back of your PL259 connector. It's no good if that happens. You get all set up and then you only have to pack up and go home again. So planning ahead is the key. If you have any questions about portable HF amateur radio, please contact myself. I'm more than happy to help if I can. I'm no expert. I've just learned from looking at others on YouTube and trying to work out exactly what I need to go out and operate portable. Check out my webpage, VK3VCM.net.
Actually, it should be VK3CRG.net now. This video, by the way, was made about 10 years ago. Back to Craig.
Or, of course, check out the other of my YouTube videos here on Craig3008 on YouTube. And you can also check out, of course, lots of other portable operators. VK3YE, Peter, he's a portable operator from here in Melbourne and has some good videos on his page as well. 73s from now from Craig, VK3 VCM.
Craig Meddings, VK3CRG from Lara. Craig's background in broadcast engineering is such that he's a very reliable source of information, and the exemplary portable setup you saw there in recent years would have been revolutionised by the development of lithium battery technology, as all portable operation has been. Instead of taking out gel cells, we can now take out lithium batteries that weigh a half, maybe a quarter of what the equivalent lead-acid battery used to. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the regular Saturday night test transmission and YouTube live stream. I see we've had about 20 viewers on the stream so far, so we must be doing something right, or Craig was at least. And I recommend that you look further into Craig VK3CRG's YouTube channel. There are a host of interesting YouTube clips that he's put up in the last 10 years. Incidentally, he was just about the first person I was aware of, the first amateur that I was aware of, who was shooting in 1080p. So the quality of his YouTube material, even from that early date, I think that last one was 2010, is exemplary. Incidentally, I'll just go back to his YouTube clip just briefly, so that you don't develop an inferiority complex. I'll just...
Hi there, and thank you for dropping by my YouTube channel.
It's his YouTube channel, but by doing a bit of snooping, I found that is not, in fact, his ham Radio Shack. So if you're looking at all that stuff and wondering what it is, it's editing stuff from ATV 10. It's the Channel 10 control room. So no, it's not Craig's Ham Shack. Don't feel inferior. This is VK3AML, just back. There we go. Another YouTube clip maker who's worthy of attention, very worthy, is one of the youngest amateurs that I'm aware of, Tom, VK3FTOM. And I'm privileged to be able to say I have video of the day I met Tom. That's Tom in the blue in the background there with his mother at the Chelsea QRP by the Bay in 2016. So this is 6 years ago, when young Tom was, I think, about 12 or 13 years old. That's me operating 160 metre portable AM and VK3YE in the background. And unfortunately, Tom's dog wanted to get into the act. You'll see Tom's dog in the background there, next to Adam. And he disconnected my bloody antenna. There we go. There's the antenna lead. Oh, he's done it. Okay. Anyway, this was the day we met Tom, and he was showing a great interest in everything going on with the radio gear, and now he has his own YouTube channel, as you'll see.
Hello all, it's Tom, VK3AML. Just thought I'd do this little piece to camera and wish everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and season's greetings. And hope everybody gets some good DX over the Christmas break. And yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all, and good DX. 7 Treasel, Tom, VK3FTOM.
This is a recent field day he did with 3MB.
I've got some 40 metre gear and some other amateur radio gear, some stuff for 10 metres as well. And I'm currently on the way up to see my good friend Michael, VK3AMB, and we're going to go and do some portable amateur radio. So yeah, I'll be back with the magic of editing.
5-9 here to Endeavour Hills. Yeah, good Happy New Year to you too, mate. Roger, I have that down there, Michael. Thanks very much for coming back to the call and enjoy the...
Talk to you again, haven't done so for a while. In fact, I don't think I've actually seen you since the last Rosewood Hamfest.
This is on One Tree Hill in the Dandenong Ranges.
Yeah, good signal, maybe slightly weaker than Tom. Maybe your voice is a bit quieter, but yes, copied okay. When I hold it, hopefully there's some propagation. I have heard the squelch break a few times today, so you never know where you might be, where your signal might end up. VK3EMB, VK3Y.
Indeed, Peter, that's the name of the game, isn't it? Well, 73s for now, and a Happy New Year to you and yours, and we'll catch up later on. Cheers for now.
Yeah, cheers, Michael, and likewise, Happy New Year, VK3EMB. Alan, over.
Yeah, QSL Alan, well, you're a nice signal, mate, you're a nice signal, and yeah, it's good to get you in the log, mate, and yeah, well, all is well here, and I appreciate the report there, Alan, and yeah, QSL on Cranbourne there, just wondering what the operating conditions are that end. Here I'm running 10 watts into a dipole slung between the trees up here at One Tree Hill Lookout. Back over to you from VK3FTOM Portable.
Yeah, right to there. Now, I assume your name's Tom. That's right, mate. It's certainly getting out. It's doing the trick there. There's a bit of wire up in the trees. You're doing all right, mate. It's nice and clear signal.
I've got the ST991A here, 991A, running 100 watts, 3 X-ray Alpha Fox.
VK3 X-ray Alpha Fox, Tom writes 3's funny. It's VK3AML, Happy New Year to you from One Tree Hill.
VK3MB, VK3 X-ray Cranbourne,
VK3CNC, VK3EMB.
Good signal. I just heard you up on One Tree Hill. I thought I heard Tom's voice, and I thought, boy, where is he today? That's a cracking signal.
Yeah, I brought Tom up with me today. We thought we'd go out and have a play day since I got to go back to work tomorrow. And so here we are, camped at One Tree Hill picnic ground, having a good time playing radios over.
VK3AML, yeah, QSL, the name is Tom.
Okay, mate, I probably should have known that, but anyway, I wasn't listening real well. I was just mucking around here. No problem, Tom. I just built the 2-element and put it up. And
nice to hear you again here on 70 centimetre, but I'm not that often VK3. Anyway, over to you. Well, over to whoever. I'll throw it up in the air, whoever can take it. I'll go back to listening because.
And now Tom was doing silos on the air, and he went to the silo in Richmond. And of course he went by bicycle and filmed Pushbike Mobile, which is more than I would be prepared to risk. There's his bike stashed on the train, and you can see he's riding with a squid pole, the signature of an amateur radio operator on the move. I think this is going down Hoddle Street towards where the Richmond wheat silos are, near the Hoddle Street Bridge. And we're getting most of the ride by the looks of it. I think that's a 7-metre squid pole he's got there. I recognise the colour coding. Could be 8. Gee, there's a bit of graffiti in Richmond, isn't there? Whoa, nearly went over. And we're there.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, don't know if you can hear me, but here in Australia we have a program called Silos of the Air, and that's the silo. So I have a 1 kilometre activation zone. So there's a river over here, and over the other side there's some parkland. So I'm going to go and set up over there with inside the activation zone for the silo, and I'm going to try and activate the silo. I need at least 3 contacts, and one of them must be on HF. So wish me luck, gentlemen. If you don't know Melbourne, this is the Yarra River. That's the Yarra River, and that's the silo that we're going to activate.
Fox Hotel, Sierra Victor. Personal instant way is Mark, Mike, Alpha, Romeo, Kilo. Over.
Yeah, QSL Mark. You're a nice signal. I'm activating a silo. I'm activating the New LX silo, Victor Kilo dash November Yankee X-ray 3, New LX silo. You are 5 and 9. Can I no, sorry, you're about 5'5", 55, mate. So 5 and 5. And so can I please have my signal report, please?
Okay, just returning back to you there. Okay, look, I probably got about 80% of that over there. Yeah, the noise is really uncomfortable this way, a little bit unusual. We've got a pretty quiet noise floor, generally speaking. But yeah, just this time of the day on 40 metres can be a little bit how you're going with that sort of stuff there. But look, familiar with that, activating the silo there, well done. Congratulations on that. And I will give you a 55 as well. That noise, if it wasn't there, you would be definitely romping in a 55. So all very, very good. And over to the Southern Highlands here in New South Wales. So got a good elevation here of over 600 metres. So that is doing the trip at least at our capacity. All right, back to you.
Yeah, no worries, Tom. Hope you're enjoying it. I did hear you on 40 metres just, but I don't have an antenna to transmit on at the moment. Had some work around the house the other day and had to take it down. But anyway, good to get you in the log. You're 5 and 3, 53, and I assume this is VK3NYX3 QSL.
You're only about strength 2, but quite readable.
on this frequency there's not much noise, so no problem. Okay, whereabouts are you?
Yes, I'm in near the city, Chris.
Ah, okay. So I didn't know what sort of a bit of UHF coverage I had into there. I'm about to change the next week or so.
And a bit of explanation here. This clip is one of Tom's where he questions as to whether older radio hams are holding the hobby back by an insistence on older styles of modulation and well-worn technical paths rather than experimenting with new ideas. I'll bear some blame for this, but it's interesting that people like Tom, with the resources of YouTube, are making a comment on it, and I think it's worth listening to what Tom has to say as one of the rising generation of amateurs about the need to break down prejudice towards F-calls, for one thing.
Killing ham radio? I would say yes and no. Yes being a lot of them believe that this hierarchical system of license class, because I have I have to pass a different exam than you, makes me better. That mentality is simply wrong, and I don't like it. And I believe that there's too much. Well, I'd have to do more when I pass my license, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. It's wrong. I'm sorry, but it's utterly and simply wrong. I believe that if you have a license, I don't care what class of license it is, I don't care if it's a foundation or an old novice or what it is. If you've passed that exam and you have a valid call sign, you should be treated the same as every other ham on the block. And Morse shouldn't have anything to do with, well, that makes me a better ham. And yes, I think this whole attitude is wrong. And I think some people, sometimes these OMs need to stop complaining and going, oh well, we're not getting young people into the hobby. Well, I wonder why, if they get on the air, start calling CQ, or they go and use FT8, and then some old curmudgeon goes, yeah, that's FT8 and one bit of the CW band. No wonder there are people complaining. No wonder they're complaining that they can't get young people in. It's because of this mentality of I'm better than you because I have this piece of paper. It's wrong and it needs to stop. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Cheers, thanks for watching.
And Tom, VK3AML, expressing a very valid opinion of one of the reasons that young people don't look so much to ham radio as a valid pastime. Tom, VK3AML, his YouTube channel is called Ham Radio and Life. Again, you can Google his YouTube channel by looking up that phrase, Ham Radio and Life. And I'll give the URL for that below this YouTube clip when it eventually appears on YouTube. This is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night test transmission and YouTube live stream. We're currently reviewing several of the channels run by prominent ham radio YouTubers around Melbourne in particular. And that brings us to Jack, VK3AML. I've known Jack for many years, have a huge amount of respect for him. He's just on retiring age, as I am, or I was a couple of years ago, and he's very much prominent in the area of APRS and orienteering, I suppose you'd describe it. It's a great way of keeping yourself fit. So I've chosen a couple of videos from Jack's YouTube channel to run tonight, which are very worthy of people viewing. One is of Jack using the most heavily abused radios in the world, the Baofeng UV9R, with a handheld 2-metre beam, contacting the International Space Station, which had a translator on it on the day that he was doing this activity. So here's Jack using the much abused Baofeng to communicate with the International Space Station.
Alright, we've got one pass that's reasonable today. It's at 8:14:40 seconds AM until 8:21:24 elevation 52.4, and it's going to be coming in. I can get to that screen. So it's going to be coming in from the southwest, and then I should have the best chance of getting into it when it's probably due south, and follow it a little bit out through the northwest. But as it's coming in from the southwest, yeah, I should start to probably hear some VK5s if they're up. It's quite early in the morning. Probably no VK6s, and I may even hear some VK4s and VK2s if I can hold it long enough, maybe a ZL or two. But we'll see how we go. Alright, just as an experiment, I set up a portable setup to see if I can get into the International Space Station FM repeater. This is a 6-element Yagi on 70 centimeters, and that's connected to a 3-element ARDF antenna. So it's quite long, a little bit heavy to operate, but we'll see how we go. Now I've got in here a diplexer, here VHF, UHF, lots of connectors, lots of loss in all that. And then that's feeding into a Baofeng UV9R. Turn that on. The Baofeng UV9R, it's supposed to be 8 watts out, but I checked it yesterday and it's only lucky to be 5. So it's pretty much the same as the UV5R. UV9R Plus. It's also supposed to be quite waterproof. That was one of the main reasons I bought it for. But if the 8 watts is 5 watts, I'm not sure about the waterproofing of it, but anyway. Yeah, so, and then I stuck a camera on a little sport camera on the boom just for a bit of fun. Probably more to pick up the audio from me as I'm calling, and you hear the stations coming in. Yeah, so that's a pretty simple setup. A bit awkward to hold though, a bit heavy. Probably needs to go on a tripod, but it's just a temporary thing. I can work the station from inside, from the shack, quite comfortably, just with a vertical. So I figure I'll probably have a good go at this. I had a go yesterday, and apparently I got in, but I could hear everyone. But getting in was a bit of a problem with only the 5 watts. But yeah, I don't think someone heard me, but probably not enough people heard me to call me back and give me a contact. So we'll try it again here. I've moved location. I was up the other end of the house for that one. So here we're coming in from over there, the southwest. I'll swing around through the south. That's probably where I'll pick it up the best. It's nice and clear out there. My elevation here is 124 metres above sea level. But to the south it's about 150 metres above sea level, and to the north it's 165 metres above sea level. So I'm down in a bit of a hollow. But once I get that south, and then it'll swing around to the south, around to the northeast, which is fairly clear over there as well. So we'll see how we go. VK3, whiskey, 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 portable. VK2WEL, VK3 Whiskey Whiskey Whiskey, portable. Yeah, VK2WEL, VK3 Whiskey Whiskey Whiskey, 5 and 9. VK3 Whiskey 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 listening.
VK2WEL, VK5 Romeo Kilo. VK5 Romeo Kilo, VK2WEL. Good morning to you, and thank you for the contact. Lovely morning here at Sydney. Good morning to you. Thank you for the contact. What's the name that way, please? The name is George. George, go ahead.
VK3 Whiskey Whiskey Whiskey. Again please, VK3 WW. VK2WEL, VK3 WW. Okay, thank you very much for that. 5 and 9. VK3 Whiskey 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 listening. VK2 USA, VK3 4W.
Portable station, VK2 USA, I think it was, VK2WEL. VK2WEL, VK2 USA, thanks for taking my call. This is the first time on the ISS.
VK2 USA, VK3 WW portable. VK2 USA, VK3 WW. VK3 Whiskey Whiskey Whiskey. Okay, well I think that's about it. Oh boy, this is a bit heavy to hold. Well, I think we made a contact. I'll have to go and look at the video later. Sorry about walking out of the range of the camera, but yeah, get a bit carried away there. I think the Doppler shift worked a bit better. and it looks like a 5 watts on the handheld with a bit of a directional antenna might help.
Now this next bit of video by Jack needs a bit of explanation. Poor old Jack was driving in his car with the ham radio antenna for I think 2 metres and 70 centimetres on the front bull bar. This is in I think Fitzroy, North Fitzroy. And unfortunately a lady who perceived that the amateur radio antenna was of the devil decided to take retribution on it, and this is one of the most hilarious videos that Jack VK3AML has ever posted. An attack on ham radio. Judge for yourself. Here we go. Look at that woman crossing the road. Now watch what she does. She stops, she walks up to Jack's car, bashes the car, rips the ham radio antenna off and throws it at poor old Jack.
Are we recording? Okay, so this is the...
Oh, that was a bad cue. This is Ralph VK3AML describing the EMDRC's field station for the VHF field day, which I believe was up in the Wombat State Forest, I think. So over to Ralph VK3 Lima, filmed by Jack VK3AML. This is VK3AML testing.
2 metre station, so just talking through the equipment that we have here. Little power supply down here which runs the radio. It's running 25 watts. We have a True North magnetic compass rotator controller, which you saw the remote demonstration of a moment ago. We have a little switch here to connect a few Ethernet things together. TS2000, which we tend to use on 2 metres. This is a preamp sequencer. So we've got the preamp on, masthead preamp, and we can switch between vertical and horizontal. Headset with a da-de-da button over here, so we use this for PTT on or off, and then we can press the button and we can get a little da-de-da happening in there. Laptop for logging with the VKCL program. This is the remote control where all of our frequencies are pre-stored, so I can tune from 150, 160, 70, 80, 90, 200, 300, so I can jump around very quickly between frequencies and different bands if I choose to. This is a fan for when it gets hot. Over here, our 70 centimetre station is very similar. Michael will be running the logger down here, but he also uses, bases a lot of the work on the aircraft enhancement. So he's got Air Scout, I think it's called, and he's got VK Logger up there. Again, over here he has the True North magnetic compass rotator controller, sequencer and preamp with his vertical and horizontal switching here. He's running just 70 centimetres, PTT, and the da-de-da button over here. He's got a PA, so he's running around 300 or so watts, and a power supply to control that. Didn't mention down here on 2 metres we run 250 to 300 down there with the PA that's under the desk. On this side over here we have our microwave stations. So Damien controls this typically. He uses these switches here to select different bands between 1296 up to 24 gigahertz. Another one of the famous magnetic compass controls. His PTT button here and da-de-da button. Operator down here can also switch different discrete frequencies, all based on the TS2000 with his logger. We have Wi-Fi internet coming in off a cellular service, and that distributes around to all the devices. All of the controllers are internet aware. Mike's just setting up the...
Yeah, 6 metres.
Yes, it is. You'll need an adapter. Yeah, I'll get that for you. So again, his logger. He's running an IC7300 with a power amplifier, hopefully turned down a little bit so that it doesn't run the full tilt. Oh, nice microphone, and power supply for the radio down there as well. And the headset. Oh, beautiful. So if we come outside, we'll have a quick look at the antennas. So starting with the microwave antennas over here, we're running a 1.8 metre dish for 1296 and 2.4 gigahertz. It's dual feed at the bottom there. Above that, just around this way a little bit, we have the 3, 5 and 10 gigahertz dish, which is an offset feed dish. And at the back of that are mounted the various relays for switching and the transverters themselves. And then finally above that, you'll see the 24 gigahertz dish, which is running with the transverter mounted at the back. Right at the very top, you can see our magnetic compass. This all comes down through this wiring loom here into Damien's side of the tent. That's a GPS antenna there, so that he can the entire station is locked to a GPS frequency reference. Up this way here we have our 70 centimetre mast. It's running, I can't count how many elements there, probably 15 or something horizontal, a little bit less on the vertical side of things, and masthead preamplifier. Over on 6 metres there, 3 element Yagi. We don't use a preamp there, not yet anyhow, but we should. And conventional rotator, not using the compass. And lastly, up there on 2 metres, 13 elements or whatever it is, I haven't counted them, horizontal. You can see the compass is a little lower on this one, so you can't quite see it from this angle. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements or so vertically polarized. That's it. That's the mighty VK3KQ portable station up here at Enfield, where we're at about 470 odd metres above sea level. We have 2 generators running, one over here which runs 2 of the stations, and there's another one further down the road by about 50 metres or so. We have a 2.2 kVA down there running the other 2 stations. So we run a few hundred watts on each station, so we need dual generators, and when it's really hot we bring out the air conditioner and we run a 3rd generator to power that, or we use that in winter to run the heater. So yes, we have a vertical antenna here which is not currently being used, just a diamond 2 and 70. We just use that for mainly communications from here into Ballarat when someone has to go in. And Damien is here now, and he's waving. So we'll get stuck into the field day. All the best, 7-3. Good luck in the contest.
Ralph, VK3 Lima, in a video that was made by Jack VK3WW at a VHF field day a couple of years ago. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. If you're listening on 147.475 and would like to see the video component that goes with these audio clips, please do Google VK3AML 5 February 2022. That's VK3AML 5 February 2022, and we're running live stream along with the internet. Well, to take us up to 11 p.m, the final clip of the night is another YouTube channel that's well worth looking at, particularly if you're into microwaves, UHF, SHF, that sort of stuff. It's run by Andrew, VK3CV. He's been licensed since 1976. He's based at Black Rock down the Bayside. And he's done experiments not only at the tens of gigahertz, but at the hundreds of gigahertz, as you'll see. So, without any further ado, he says, just having lost his media source, and I can't right-click on it, damn it.
Alright, we've got one pass.
No, that's Jack's clip. Would you believe I clicked on the screen and immediately the media source disappeared. So I've got to go to Tools, Help, View, Docs, Reset UI. That's got it. Now I'll bring up Andrew VK3CV.
Hello all, this is Andrew VK3CV with a full demonstration of the 30 terahertz receiver and transmitter system. This is our receiver unit, a parabolic reflector with our Malexis sensor in the focal point, and round the back of the unit here we can see our demodulator board, DSP board. It's all done in a little...
In terahertz, by the way, this is probably qualified as far infrared.
Little microprocessor on there, analog RSSI signal strength meter, and a selector switch for either peaking mode or demodulator mode. All powered from a 9-volt battery, and there's just a little on-off switch here. We'll just switch the unit on. It's in peaking mode at the moment, so basically we see nothing on the RSSI until we find a signal. I've got a signal source set up on the other side of the room here. So as we find the peak, you see the RSSI meter increase and you hear the pitch increase. When we go to demod mode, what happens now is as I move on and off the signal, we either get a tone to show signal is present or no tone when there's no signal present. It also has a very slow response time on that RSSI meter in that mode. Go back to the peaking mode and I'll just demonstrate how we can generate a low level signal using our finger. As you can hear, my finger is quite an effective source of terahertz radiation being picked up by that sensor.
What he's picking up is actually the heat of his finger.
So that's a very useful way of checking that your system is actually working properly. If we go back to demod mode again, you can see when I come past a certain threshold, the tone oscillator switches on telling me that I'm receiving a signal. This is how we can send messages using Morse code. Okay, we'll just turn that off for a moment while we go and have a look at our transmitter, which is located over here. This is a very simple black body source, which is a copper plate which has been painted black, and on the back of it there is a series of surface mount resistors which are just supplied with a DC current, and obviously they get warm, quite warm. We've got a thermal camera here, and that's telling me that that source is up at about 115 degrees Celsius at the moment. That's just in an insulated enclosure with some plastic food wrap actually as a window on the outside of it, and that's just to stop stray air currents from cooling the system down and having to input a lot more power than what we would normally have to keep it at a certain temperature. Plastic food wrap is actually quite a nice window at 30 terahertz. Glass, for instance, is practically totally opaque. You can't transmit very much energy at all through glass. But a very thin piece of plastic food wrap works very nicely as a transmission window. So we'll just go back and demonstrate how we can receive signals from that particular source. We'll leave our unit in demod mode. Actually, no, we won't. We'll switch it on. We'll put it in peaking mode, and we will peak up on that signal, which is there. Put it into demod mode, and now we're going to modulate our transmitter.
If it was any hotter, it'd be smoke signaled.
Not very good Morse code there, but that is the techniques that is used to modulate the transmitter. And it's a simple matter of using a blocking material of some description. In this case, it's just an ordinary piece of paper, and that just interrupts the transmission of the 30 terahertz signal and allows us to modulate it using Morse code. Now, the other thing I've set up here today is a different method of modulation, which is using a secondary reflector or a heliograph. We call it a heliograph when we're using the sun as a transmitter, and we're able to move this reflector, which is just a polished piece of aluminium, in and out of the correct optical path between the transmitter and receiver, and we will be able to modulate the device. So let's go back to our receiver, put it on peaking mode, switch it on. Now we'll spin it round towards where the reflector is, and we can see we're getting a very nice peak off that reflector. So we'll go back to our demod mode, and we can still modulate this way if we want to, or we're going to go over here, get behind our plate, and we can modulate by making very, very small movements on that reflector. Very, very small movements are required just to bring the beam in and out of the focal point of the dish. So that allows us to use a secondary source, being the sun, or the source we're using in this case, our black body source, as the transmitter, and we modulate it in the path with this reflector heliograph. So there we have it. That's pretty much how the system works. A simple transmitter modulated with a gate or a baffle, whatever you want to call it, and a receiver based on a thermopile sensor element. So there we have it. Thank you very much for your interest.
And that was the YouTube channel of Andrew Anderson, VK3 Charlie Victor, illustrating the transmission of signals in the far infrared. So we've done the full distance from 160 metres to infrared tonight. It's 11 p.m. and usually I open it up at this time of night for a chat back on 147.475, which means I have to change my monitoring so that I'm listening off the mixer output, not off 2 metres, otherwise I won't hear the other end. And there we go. Now I should be able to hear off 2 metres. So this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima now calling CQ for anybody who'd like to be in a QSO, and standing by on 147.475.
A VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
A VK3 Alpha Charlie Zulu.
We have VK3 CG. Hi Dave. And VK3ACZ. Peter, great. Okay. As you might have noticed tonight, we have unwittingly been subject to some distortions from a bum sound card for several months, which I've traced only with difficulty. I'm trying to work out why we'd lost one particular channel on the sound card, and it appears the input's blown on one channel of my sound card out to the net, and it was putting quite a load across the output of the audio system going into it. But now that's been resolved. The levels have been lined up and peak limited to the appropriate level, and hopefully we'll have audio that's a bit more like optimum both on 2 meters and on live stream. So, what have you been up to, Dave? And is your mouth better? Last time we heard from you, you just had some dental surgery of a fairly major type, and I can imagine what all of the Novocaine and stuff would do to you. VK3CG and group VK3AML, with a pause if anybody else would like to break in.
Yeah, VK3AML on the group VK3ECG. Yes, well, it's been a little bit traumatic, as they say. At least I got given some decent painkillers, but I don't like taking too much of that sort of stuff at the best of times, just to keep it dampened down. But probably it's been probably a couple of weeks actually of some sort of discomfort one way or another, which has not been great. But I've potted around and done bits and pieces and got some writing done and a few other things which needed to get done. Yeah, a bit below par, you might say. The rest of it, enjoy this evening. Yes, the Ukraine stuff is certainly very interesting and very ingenious approaches to getting messages out. I particularly like the waterfall display stuff. Really quite a clever way of doing that, and of course fairly ubiquitous these days for so many radios, mostly transceivers, though I'm sure they're with the web-SDRs, of course. It's really wide open to get picked up by anybody, isn't it, really? So that's a very clever approach. I've never really tried any of the video transmission modes, but I've downloaded EasyPal from time to time. It doesn't seem to run on my computer. Maybe there's maybe an upgraded version I need to find or something like that, but it is a fairly old PC in my shack, so maybe it's having a little bit of difficulty. I don't know what the sort of current version might be. But I have been successful with a few other bits and pieces, and whilst I'm not sort of enamoured of things like FT8 and things like that, I have tried it, and it did work, and I got some success, but running fairly low power, but just shows it can be done, and who knows, I might get a bit more interested in those things a bit later on. Lots of fiddling around to do. I tried to do a bit of shack clearing out, and had a bit of problem with my audio. I haven't been able to do a lot of listening to music since the rest of the house has been taken over by family and various bits and pieces, so I've actually put a really quite decent sort of hi-fi system up in my shack now, so I can at least retire there and listen to some nice music as well if I want to. But it does mean that your audio on the YouTube stream is surprisingly good. Things it's going through a quad 405 power amplifier into some tannoy speakers, which is certainly overkill for a YouTube channel, but is at the same time makes for a very nice and very comfortable listening. Anyway, back to you there, Chris. VK3AML in the group VK3ECG.
VK3ECG and group VK3AML. EasyPal. I've had occasional problems on specific computers, not necessarily the most modern of operating systems. Certain versions of Windows 7 and certain versions of Windows 10 don't seem to like it, and particularly Windows Defender at one stage was, whenever it detected EasyPal working, it would eliminate it from the computer, regarded it as a virus. And with quite a few computers you actually have to disable the virus checker while you download it. After that, when you operate it, it will usually operate well. But it's literally a software package designed by an amateur who's now passed on. He passed on in 2015, unfortunately, but the EasyPal software package had reached a fairly high level of sophistication by the time he died. He was an aeronautical expert, had been an airline pilot. I think he'd graduated into management, and was expert in communications matters, and particularly Eric Sunstrup, VK3AML, was well known for writing software with C++, I think. But I have an idea he died without revealing the source code for the original EasyPal software designed for Microsoft. However, a parallel group has got an EasyPal system going for Linux, and that is open source software, and the source code is known. And it's had about 5 or 6 years more development applied to it than the original EasyPal system, but all of my computers here are Microsoft based, so there's not much I can do about that. Glad to hear that most of your discomfort's over, Dave. At least that's a positive. Just a description here. Now with the better form of speech level limiting, audio limiting, I have to watch the noise of things like cooling fans. The cooling fan just came on in my 12-volt supply. It switches on from time to time. And it's a fairly old supply, and I suspect that the bearings have had the Richard in the cooling fan. So I may have to look for a new cooling fan, or, as 3HP suggested, pull the thing out, take it apart, re-grease it, and put it back together. I'll hand it round to Peter, VK3ACZ, and I believe Monday may be the meeting of the Sherbrooke group. Is that right, Peter? VK3ACZ and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group, VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris. Good morning, Dave, and morning. Where'd that come from? Good evening, Dave and listeners. I think I'm on the morphine at the moment. Anyway, yes, QSL on that Sherbrooke Radio Club meeting on Monday evening, 19:30 hours. Be there or be square. And a couple of comments about the videos there. A great collection of folks who do their bit to help us all evolve and keep us interested in radio, and stuff to watch on a rainy day, etc. Very interested in the going portable side of it, since I do my best work portable because of the QR Mary situation at home. The FTOM and 3EMB up at One Tree Hill, I listened very closely to that one because I spoke to Tom during that afternoon and thought, I might even appear in his video, but wasn't to be. But still good to watch. And the Angry Girl with VK3WW, wow, I could only ponder what sort of personal circumstances that poor girl is in. Not that it's any consolation for the loss of your antenna like that. And here was me thinking maybe he could have been half justified in planting the foot at that moment, but we won't go any further with that one. And with you highlighting other successful YouTubers that are providing us entertainment, knowledge, and good fun there, I think it's time some of them started including you in their video presentations there. Chris, what do you reckon? Hi. You're certainly my pick of the presenters that needs more acknowledgement. And good to hear, Dave, that you're on the recovery. I had 4 wisdom teeth out all at once under a GA when I was around about 20 years of age, and I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten the feeling the sodium pentothal go up my arm, and then the next minute opening my eyes and thinking, oh, they haven't done the procedure. And no, wait a minute, I've got a mouthful of gauze and somebody's shaking a jar with 4 teeth, rattling in it in front of my face. No, they have done it. And then I had a couple of weeks of drinking all my food through a straw. So I can certainly commiserate to some extent, or begin to imagine in a small way what it must be like for you recently. Not a lot of fun. Anyway, back to you, Chris. Looking forward to meeting up with you on Monday evening, hopefully. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Yeah, I'll check with Prue on arrangements for Monday, but I don't think there's anything on, so I should be off the leash for the night. I'll come up the bus to Ferntree Gully and then the train across to Boronia. That's always an enjoyable trip, actually, particularly at the moment, because usually you're the only person on the bus. It's sad. I don't know whether you saw the very first clip I put on with the photos I took down Ackland Street, St Kilda, only on Thursday, but it's deserted. At least 20% of the shops are closed with for lease signs on them. In my lifetime, I've never seen St Kilda like that. It really it makes you realise the number of businesses that have gone to the wall, and I can't see it recovering to its pre-COVID state for a very long time. I haven't been into the city since the last lockdown. I rather fear for what I'm going to find when I get in there. Places that used to buzz like De Graves Street are probably completely deserted or very nearly so. And now that businesses have got used to operating their office staff from home, I very much doubt that it'll ever get back to its original level of population in the city. People don't like going in there very much, particularly at peak hour. And people renting office space, if they can get away with renting less, I suppose they'll see that as extra profits for the company. So back around to Dave, Angry Girl. I would say by the way she was dressed that she makes her money standing on a street corner. And Jack pointed out to me afterwards, after we had a bit of a giggle about the whole thing, although Jack lost an antenna worth about $100 out of it. The thing captured on the cam pointing through the front window, the travel cam, or whatever you call it, it was almost worth it for the laugh. But later on he found out that crossing is very close to a safe drug injection room, which puts an entirely different perspective on it. Round to you, Dave. VK3ECG in the group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML group, VK3ECG, yes, I think you're right there. I would say that that's probably the greater part of the explanation for the behaviour. It certainly is in a part of the town where interesting things happen, and I've had occasion to visit a couple of those tower blocks that were visible in the distance for odd and interesting situations, as you say. But it's not a terribly surprising sort of bit of behaviour, really. I've actually come back to my car to have having an antenna completely bent at right angles on one occasion. That was just parked in an ordinary suburban street. I suspect just some kids coming out of school or something bent it over, but that was at least able to be straightened out. It didn't have any sort of loading things in the middle of it, so it just bent and got straightened out again. But yeah, the city's changed a lot, I have to say, and I don't go in as much now as I used to, obviously. Pretty well going in every day, but now I tend to just go in on Mondays and Tuesdays, sometimes just Tuesday, and I don't tend to get out into the city very much when I'm there, actually. I'm in South Bank, so I'm mostly just in that South Bank area. The cafes have picked up again around the ABC and around the Arts Complex, so and things have just started. I have started to pick up a bit there, I must say. But once you go into the sort of parts of the city or the sort of retail areas, that certainly is not the same as it was, and certainly not the same numbers of people around. I remember the sort of days where people were rushing out on the street and pulling the mask down and smoking and drinking coffee and then rushing back in again, but that seems to have sort of settled now with people working more from home. And yes, I think you're right that there will be a whole load of people who do not return to the workplace in the same way, although I do think it's going to be
obviously they'll reduce the size of a lot of the office space areas, but I suspect there'll be that sort of the circulating hot desk type situation more, where you have a small office space with people coming in, and some days and not other days. I think it isn't as easy to work just with meetings on Zoom and things like that, and I've had to give evidence a few times now on teleconferencing and evidence, and it isn't quite the same. I had a fascinating experience actually in the Supreme Court. It was a committal hearing, I think, or something like that anyway, and I was giving some evidence, and everything worked on the tests beforehand, and then as soon as we actually went live, as it always does on these occasions, there was a terrible echo, and they were sort of saying to me, can you find some headphones? And of course I didn't have that sort of thing at work, but fortunately I managed to mute my microphone and just use my space key as a push to talk button, and being reasonably used to pushing push to talk buttons, that was reasonably easy for me. So it didn't work too badly in the end of the day, but it is extremely variable. Which sometimes an environment will work perfectly well, and other times it won't. Yes, I mean, as I said, the YouTube stuff's fascinating, and I do watch quite a lot of the various YouTubes, and obviously I see quite a few of Peter's, and there's quite a few UK hams as well who do portable work, and some interesting videos coming out of there. Often a very different sort of environment of cold and wet and things like that, of course, but there has been some good ones, and there's a few good US ones as well. There's an awful lot of, I think, rather tedious ones where there's endless unboxing of new equipment and things like that, but once you get past those, the people who actually are demonstrating what they're doing and why this antenna worked or didn't work or whatever, there's some useful instructional things around, and you've just got to be a bit selective, I think. What else do I find? Yes, I don't have any sort of radio videos. There are a few of me in sort of various work settings and things like that we've done, although you have to be very careful, because we did this series at work called Afterlife, but of course you've got to be careful looking it up on YouTube, because otherwise you finish up with a lot of Ricky Gervais stuff, or some very interesting religious videos and discussions on the afterlife and things like that. But if you do afterlife forensic, you'll see a few things which include maybe in the more sensible approach. But it's all good fun. I've actually there's a medical one. If you have anything to do with medical profession, Peter, you might like this. There's a extraordinarily nice set of videos from an American who calls himself Dr. Glaucoma Flecken. I think it's Glaucom Flecken, and he's an ophthalmic surgeon, by the looks of it. But he does he's the only actor, but he plays all the parts, and he does these absolutely wonderful videos that send up the medical profession and send up all the specialties. So the nephrologists and the surgeons and the neurosurgeons and all their characteristics and what it's like to be a junior doctor, and they are absolutely hysterical. Most of them are very short. They're only 2 or 3 minutes, but they just capture the moment. And there's a wonderful series that he has about the emergency ophthalmologist called to help in ICU for the COVID crisis, and it's very, very good about with the ICU doctors just can't understand how an eye surgeon's going to be of any use to them whatsoever, and of course he isn't. So it's well worth watching. So Dr. Glaucom Flecken. Glaucom, and then Flecken, Flecken, and they're very, very funny indeed. Peter, you'll enjoy them. VK3AML, VK as group, VK3ECG.
Yeah, I the reason I chose mostly VK3 websites to review or to draw attention to is, in most cases, I've either worked those people on the air or know them personally. Craig CRG, I think I've spoken to on the air a few times. Tom I know quite well. went to his, I think, 17th or 18th birthday party, only about 3 or 4 months ago. Jack 3WWW I've known 25 years. The only one I don't know out of that group is Andrew VK3CV, but his optical work at infrared so parallels the sort of stuff that I've been doing with Mike VK7MJ with optical at light frequencies. I thought it was worthwhile including that. It would appear from what we're seeing there that the main thing that Andrew lacks for a viable link is a modulatable infrared source. It's actually quite difficult to achieve because most infrared sources have thermal lag, sometimes of several seconds. So getting them to resolve to the kilohertz level is getting them to follow modulation to the kilohertz frequency, I should say, speed, is quite difficult. You can do it, I believe, with a torch globe with a very fine filament and a lot of heat sinking. I did it, 50 years ago. I modulated a torch globe and managed to get muffled but unintelligible just speech. I have a few recordings of that from 50 years ago. The only thing that's embarrassing is I had a piping, high-pitched voice at that stage. Next week I'll run some more videos from somebody for whom I have an enormous amount of respect, Paul VK3 Hotel November from Eltham. Paul has done some magnificent work with Class D AM modulation for 160 and 80 metres, and I've listened into Paul's 80 metre Class D switch mode 160 metre transmitter from the VK3ARG excellent web-SDR in northern South Australia, and the quality is right up there with AM broadcast stations. It's extraordinary. And because he's using pulse width modulation for the modulator and Class D switch mode for the PA stage, the whole thing is, the whole transmitter is something like 90% efficient. It really does make AM viable for portable operation. And with that, through to Peter. Do you know if there's any syllabus item for tomorrow, Peter? Sorry, not tomorrow, Monday. I'd be curious about that, though no doubt I can't remember his name, the chap with the handlebar moustache who usually brings along a few YouTube clips to show. He's usually good value. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ. That would be Greg, 3KWX, you're describing, I think. And no, I don't, only that there'll be a discussion about the next radio camp for those of us who are desirous of heading up bush to hang wires in trees and play radio for a few days. We're heading off to some park between Denali and Tarnagulla, if I recall, so there'll be some discussion about that, but I don't know what else he's got planned. It'll be something good. It'll be just good to catch up with everybody. And thank you, Dr. Dave, for your suggestion about Dr. Glaucomflecken. Well, that's what I've written down anyway. And I'm, as of the last Sherbrooke Radio Club meeting, I was introduced to Electro Boom, and that funny fella who finds new ways to either burn or electrocute himself while imparting some brilliant knowledge about all things electrical and electronics. That's been a great little find, because I'm learning things and being entertained at the same time with that one as well. But I'll give it a look, Dave. And my thoughts about Angry Girl too. Yes, I had this strange thought that she turned up and a dealer said, you're behind on your bill or something, and she stormed off very angry, or she just had an OD and the ambos had given a Narcan and spoiled the effects of the last injection. They were my thoughts, but something all that tragic. Not that it excuses the behaviour, of course, but interesting to see it on film. I'm sure if he'd got out and remonstrated with her, she would have quickly reminded him that she's got rights and he hasn't, such is the nature of these things. But anyway, Chris, also QSL and your comments about things being deserted and trams in St Kilda being deserted too. I just find watching the suburban trains going through Baronia, Ferntree Gully and the like, it's still strange that the public haven't come back in mass, and there's one person per carriage, or sometimes even one person per train, and yeah, this is the way of it at the moment. I don't know how long it's going to last, but in certain areas things are just not getting back to normal. Maybe they shouldn't, I don't know. Anyway, back to you. Oh, now before I do, another comment for Dave. I thought you might like to know that since you're a hate chef aficionado from time to time, that some G-men are being heard by me on 10 metres of an evening. It's wonderful now that we're starting to get propagation on 10. I mean, the solar flux index is around 130 at the moment. We've had a bit of solar activity later this week, I think, which has cut things down a little bit. But earlier in the week, G0FWX Gary near Birmingham was heard by me a few times, and not myself, but a couple of other people worked him on 10 metres. I've spoken to him on 20, but that's nowhere near the achievement it is to come in on 10. So, yeah, be warned, be armed that 10 metres is really cracking on well. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Just leaving a gap in case anybody wanted to come in. I must give that a listen myself. A subject that I thought would be worthy of making a lengthy clip about, possibly even for the duration of the 90 minutes that I usually have an introductory clip. I've got to know over the last 3 years, I guess, how to use web-SDRs extremely well. There are two families of them. The University of Twente group, which was the first set of web-SDRs to come online, and later Kiwi SDR, which has a few more facilities such as IQ reception and synchronous AM detection. There also is integral radio teletype and slow scan demodulation on some of those web SDRs. They're getting more sophisticated as time goes on, and some of them are in profoundly excellent locations, like that one VK3ARG at near Tarlee in northern South Australia, up near the top of Spencer's Gulf, a bit higher actually, I think almost to the Flinders Ranges. And it is so quiet there, how can I put it, 80 metres sounds like it did in suburban Melbourne in 1968, and I can remember what that was like. Purely you can hear static crashes, none of the hiss or funny noises from switch mode supplies. It's really quiet out there, so anybody running 5 watts in New Zealand on 80 metres can be heard from that VK3ARG website. There are something like 500 web-based SDRs around the world, maybe even 700 now, I think. Though in some parts of the world they're very rare. South America, not so many. Africa, only a few. Europe is lousy with them, so it's easy to monitor that Russian buzzer on 4625 kilohertz. America, quite a few. But just there are certain parts of the world where there are not too many. There are not too many in Southeast Asia, not too many in China. Surprisingly, there are quite a few in Russia. Right out as far as Vladivostok, there's one in the middle of Siberia at a place called Novosibirsk, and I suspect that out on the steppes there it's about the only thing that you can do that's not totally boring. It's, I mean, you know, flat, featureless land as far as the eye can see. If it wasn't for Stalin, they probably would never have settled it. So, back to you, Dave, VK3CG, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima.
Yeah, VK3AML group, VK3ECG. Yes, just leaving a bit of a gap, but it seems relatively quiet tonight. I apologise for not joining in last week, but I'm not sure. It would have made an awful lot of sense, actually. One of the things about being actually given a prescription for Panadine Fort is you do have quite a lot of codeine in it, and codeine is metabolised to morphine. So effectively, you actually have a dose of morphine in effect. It's quite interesting, but it does tend to make you a little bit on the drowsy side. And I actually don't like that. It's really something I've never really liked. Is that sort of feeling. So it's not something that goes down well with me. But yes, Paul HN. Yes, I've watched a few of his videos actually, and I've heard him on occasion, of course. But it's not that far from me in effect. Yes, and some of his designs are very, very elegant indeed and beautifully built. Very impressed with his stuff, I must say. Yes, you were saying, Peter, about the Narcan and the addicts. It's really quite interesting because it's actually quite dangerous because a lot of the time is that the ambulance are called, they get given Narcan, they wake up, but the half-life of Narcan is a lot shorter than the half-life of the heroin morphine they've taken. So they get up very, very cross that they've lost their high, and of course you try to get them to hospital because eventually the Narcan will actually wear off, but of course they usually don't want to go to hospital and they disappear quite cross, and of course the Narcan will wear off before the morphine/heroin wears off. So it's a slightly risky prospect, but I mean there's not much you can do. That's the reality of that. Yes, I have listened to 10 meters a bit and got on 10, and yes, there's been some even just around Australia some incredibly strong signals from territory, and yes, I've certainly heard some European stations on 10. My antenna system isn't probably really that good from that point of view, but it's been as you expect, sporadic and interesting, and you're never quite sure what's going to go on unless you're actually there, or one of these monitoring systems I suppose you can have to alert you when these things are happening. But it has been very impressive, hasn't it? I agree. And I've heard quite a few stations in the UK. I think Gary's station up around Birmingham, he's got some nice antennas, I think, so that helps, no doubt, quite a bit. Yeah, I as I said, enjoy the glaucoma flecken videos. It'll bring you back to your days in the general hospital area, because it's a lot of the jokes are somewhat in jokes, but they're funny in their own way anyway. But anyone who's had any sort of experience of working with the vagaries of the different personalities associated with the different medical specialties will enjoy them enormously. And yes, I've heard of the electro boom person. I must watch a few of those. They certainly sound very interesting. I'll go back to your cooling fans, Chris. Yes, it was funny as you were saying that. I heard the cooling fan start up, and I could hear it. And my power supply cooling fans just started here as well. Although it's off the back of the mic now, so hopefully it isn't too bad. And some of the modern fans are really interesting. Some of the computer fans these days have these sort of floating magnetic mounts or magnetic bearings. So theoretically, they have very little wear on them, and maybe one of those fans could be used to replace something that's a bit noisy. They certainly would probably last a lot longer, but I don't know. Some of the stuff for computers is not made that well, I have to say, and the failure rates can be quite high. Especially with those switch mode power supplies, they do really very strange things sometimes and just pack up.
a friend who was doing some work and running servers, and they had a terrible problem because somebody was working on the air conditioning system and in his office, and they put new aluminium ducting or something like that, and were cutting and sawing and dust, and the aluminium dust just got into the power supplies and just basically shorted out, wrecked them. And some, half a dozen servers had to have completely new power supplies put in because it was just they were completely destroyed by the dust. I suppose it's a bit similar to the sort of eventually the sort of carbon build up and smoke and things like that can cause so much damage to equipment. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML and the group VK3ECG.
I stand by for breakers that never come. VK3ECG and group VK3AML, well, I certainly know the conductive material problem. Years ago, I was stupid enough to put a laser printer, which had a cooling fan on it, blowing air out, near a CRT, this is how long ago this was, near a high-resolution CRT video display screen, a VDU, for my first computer, and eventually on the surface of the CRT you could hear crackling from the EHT, which was reacting to the carbon from the laser printer refills going through the air and landing in the tube, probably being attracted by the high static voltages, and eventually the EHT supply went up in flames quite spectacularly. With regard to drug taking, my last contact with it through a friend who was much younger and rather stupid was a girl who was, this is when I was in my late 30s, so she would have been in her early 20s, cradle snatcher. But she used to go to parties called Rohypnol parties, and she tried to explain it to me. She never invited me to one, thank goodness. But they take this Rohypnol, which I believe is a sleeping drug, and they sit around and go to sleep. No alcohol, no sex, they sit around and go to sleep. And I just had to ask her, don't you find this monumentally boring? And apparently, if you take a little alcohol with the Rohypnol, you get a high out of it. But it's not the sort of thing that I'd do for entertainment. I mean, I'd rather have a bottle of red lemonade, if the truth be known. Second childhood. Afterlife. Dave, when you mentioned that, I immediately thought of Ricky Gervais because my wife became addicted to Afterlife, the series, and watched it on Netflix, I think in 2.5 days, which is really something for a thing that's gone through 2 or 3 series. But it appeared to be very well written, and Ricky Gervais is certainly a brilliant guy, both as an actor and as a writer. The city having changed, I'll have to brace myself for that. I'll go in there with a camera soon and just shoot a bit of video in there in the hope that eventually it'll change, but if not, the video that I shoot of the deserted city may someday be historic. Okay, Panadine Fort, I agree with you. I've had it on a number of occasions when I've injured myself, either a broken bone or at one occasion had a nail effectively driven through my foot. I stood on a scarifying rake which had fallen down with its tongs, its spiky bits standing upwards, and I didn't see it and just went on it with my foot, and one of the outer tongs went through my foot, actually went through the sole of the shoe, through the foot and out the top of the shoe, and I looked down and I realised I was nailed to something not unlike Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago, except it was there was nothing divine about it, and there was certainly nothing divine about the series of 4-letter words that came out of my mouth that the neighbours heard on the occasion. Magnetic bearings, I'll have to look into that. Interesting. You're in South Bank. Well, I suppose with all the hotels there and interstate visitors, are there any interstate visitors? I suppose there'd be a few trickling through. In South Bank it wouldn't be too bad there, but I imagine places like De Grave Street, Royal Arcade, Burke Street Mall must be pretty badly hit. Actually, when I put the photos of Ackland Street up on Facebook, a friend of mine who lives in the Prahran area said, if you think Ackland Street is depressing, you should see Chapel Street, Prahran. So apparently it's pretty bad there too. VK3ACZ and group, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima.
VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ. Yes, and my memories go back to the weirdest thing I've ever seen, which I wish I could have recorded on film, and that was Collins Street, middle of the afternoon during the worst of the curfew. Yeah, well, curfew and all the 5K restrictions and that. Now, I'd taken a lady that I was part-time carer for into the Ioneer Hospital, and we went in by taxi, and I thought, we'll catch the train home, and it'd be a good chance to stretch the legs a little bit and push a wheelchair along Collins Street and head up to Flinders Street Station. Again, just as I said, for the opportunity to get out and see something and appreciate being let out of jail, so to speak. And it was just eerie being able to walk across streets against the traffic lights because there was just no traffic and nobody around, and I can scarcely forget that one. Anyway, Panadine Fort. The funny thing is, Panadine Fort doesn't work on me. Doesn't work at all. But boy, the couple of times I've had IM morphine, wow, it doesn't get much better. I know why druggies do what they do. It can't be justified, and it's we all know where it ends up. But for that incredible euphoria I experienced, it was just something I also can hardly forget. And talk about cooling fans. The cooling fan on my 991A is like me, doesn't really like the heat at all. It often won't work transmitting, but you can be sure if it's over 32 degrees in the shack, which it's been a few times lately, it runs the whole time the radio is on. As I said, it likes the heat as much as I do, which is not very much at all. And one last thing, and especially direct my comments to, my question to Dave, I think we'd all be hiding under a rock if we didn't hear the events of this week concerning the Footscray Cemetery. And I was particularly puzzled, horrified, and pick an emotion, I think I had it. But first, when thinking about if it was one of my loved ones who'd been desecrated in such a fashion and part of them had been removed like that, how could I possibly feel? I couldn't begin to imagine the sense of desecration and violation, etc. But also left pondering deeply is what on earth would possess somebody to do such a thing. I'm wondering if Dave has any insights. I know that it's not quite his field, but I'm sure you've seen a few people that had been lying in state, so to speak, for some time. I presume it's not a very pretty sight. So I'm wondering at the motivation of such people, and wondering if either of you have got any comments about that. Sorry for lowering the tone of the evening's QSO. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Well, I've heard of it happening in Canberra, of all places. I worked for a certain organisation. I won't say which one. You'll probably know, as you know me for some time. And one of the younger members of staff, who was about 20, had got in with a gang. Would have kept it to himself had it not hit the papers that he and his gang were going into the Queanbeyan Cemetery, digging up bodies, opening up coffins. Then, this is somewhat unpleasant, I hope you've eaten, swishing their hand around in the corpse liquor, I think they call it, to try and get jewellery. And frequently, particularly in 19th century burials, people were buried with their jewellery. Dave probably has come across this. Also, if you know anything about Satanism, there is a certain amount of body desecration involved with that. Now, the one substance I'd query you on, Dave, that I went off my nut on was when, with that foot operation, the doctor gave me something called endone, E-N-D-O-N-E. And how could I describe it? I was aware that I was non-stop talking, but I could do nothing to stop myself. It was almost as if I was not in control of my own body, and I was saying inappropriate stuff, and I was aware of it, and there was not a damn thing I could do to stop it. Endone, it sent me right off. Prue was a witness to it, and she, every time a doctor suggests prescribing it for pain relief, Prue stomps on the idea, being an old nurse. VK3ECG and group, VK3AML. Sorry to put you through professional questioning.
Yes, VK3ECG training. Yes, all these sort of narcotic agents have weird effects on people. It's just very really. Oxycodone and endone is just really a similar narcotic. At the end of the day, it is very effective, and it's used a fair bit for severe pain, and it comes in a variety of formulations. But like all these things, it's one of they affect different people in different ways. I mean, it's interesting what you were saying, Peter, about the pounding thoughts and do anything for you. That's probably because that tends to can't metabolize codeine effectively to morphine, and it's only about particularly Caucasian populations, and they can't convert it. There's a liver enzyme that does the conversion, and they don't have it, or it's polymorphism, and they just don't have the sufficient enzyme to do that, so that they don't really get much of the effect. There's a codeine effect, but they don't get the morphine-like effect, so it's far less effective. It's quite interesting, really. But yes, the rohypnol part is still around, and it certainly was one of the drugs that was used a lot in allegations of drink spiking and all of that sort of stuff as well. It's really just another benzodiazepine-like Valium, Librium, and all those sort of drugs, but a particularly fast-acting and aggressive form of it. But like you say, the people just basically become sedated. And I suppose there's an amnesiac effect as well, interestingly, for a lot of those benzos. But anyway, it's sort of weird and funny things. I remember, actually, it's interesting, because some of the days when I was doing some of the sort of clinical forensic type working and stuff, I used to have to go down Chapel Street, and I try to avoid going down Chapel Street at sort of 1, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at all the nightclubs, and it was just like I can't describe it really. It just the pavements and the road had blurred with people moving from pavements onto the road, taxis stopping in the middle of the road, opening all their doors, blocking the entire traffic, and you did everything you could to avoid going anywhere near Chapel Street on between about 2 and 3 in the morning as the clubs, and particularly when the clubs started to sort of empty. It was an absolute schmozzle, and but absolutely packed out. And I mean, not that I go down Chapel Street at 1 to 3 in the morning, that sort of thing these days, but I imagine it's very, very different, very different indeed. But there we are. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML in the group, VK3ECG.
VK3FTGS.
G'day, Terry. Would you like to take it for an over?
I won't, but I'll just say good evening to everybody. You've got a fair bit of crackling coming through your audio, Chris.
It's coming off 2 metres. It's not over me, is it?
No, I'm not hearing it off either, obvious, but yeah, it's sounding it's very much in there. It's just like a crackling, ripping noise.
Yeah, it's on 2 metres. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't think it's anything in the shack. It may be power line leak. I don't know. But it's odd.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like some sort of interference. Whether you got RF get into your cables or... I'm not sure.
No, it's just, it happens from time to time. My antenna is fairly high gain, but it's a long way from 66 kV lines out the front. But if those 66 kV lines are sparking for whatever reason, if there hasn't been rain for a while and it's a particularly dry night, they can spark over and cause that. Nothing much I can do.
Yeah, if you just look at the timeline, yeah, you'll be right.
Yeah, look, I can't really be worried about it. I'm actually thinking of upgrading the feed line cable going from the shack up to the Diamond X7000 I'm using for 2 metres and 70 centimetres. I was looking at Belden 9913, but that's getting hard to get. There is a type of low-loss coax, thick coax, 1 centimetre diameter approximately, called CNT400, available from mini kits in Adelaide. It's about $5 a metre, and I only need about 12 metres, something like that. The mast is just outside my window, so just from the bottom of the antenna to the rig is no more than 12 metres. So that'd be, what, $60? Not all that much. Probably a little bit extra with the plugs stuck on the end of it, and that might give me a bit more, a bit less loss. I don't know whether it would affect the sig to noise, probably not. But this time of the night it won't be solar power supplies that are causing it. Yeah, well aware of it, can hear it in the headphones, but there's bugger all I can do about it, I'm afraid, Terry. I'll better hand it round anyway. VK3ACZ, and I think that's who's in line, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ, and good evening to you, Terry. Good signal over to this side of town. If there's any crackle on your signal, I'm not sure whether you're referring to the feed, a YouTube feed or whatever, but you're absolutely rock solid, full quietening with me. Nothing strange on your audio at all there, Chris. And on the subject of all that, I've got a little bit of that 400 laying around. I run my main antenna on it, and it's a bugger of a stuff to try and bend around corners and all that, as you would know. So anyway, if you're looking for a bit, I know where I can find some for you there, Chris. 3AML, 3ACZ.
Yes, well, if I can get it for $5 or less, I'd be interested. Is that possible?
12 metres, you said you wanted.
Roundabout, yep.
I'll bring it on Monday night.
Oh my God, well thank you very much. The next thing I have to address is how to get, if they will go, PL259 connectors on the end.
Right, yes. The J-Car ones that I originally had, when I put them on my antenna up to the Diamond, eventually changed them for better quality ones from the toy shop, and the SWR went down a small amount. Who would have thought? But I noticed the ones that J-Car have now are much better, the ones for the larger size of coax. But I don't know about connectors. I bought a couple of J-Car ones to put on some RG58, and it was just the ants pants. But anyway, back to you, Chris.
Okay, well thank you very much. You've saved me a lot of stuffing about with mail from Adelaide and all that sort of stuff. The RG213 that I currently have going up there and its connectors has been used here since my 27 meg days. It's about 26 years old, so it's about due for a replacement, not so much for 2 metres, but for 70 SEMS. I'll hand it back to you, Peter. Sorry, VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Yeah, and I'll hand it straight back to you. So yeah, I'll turn up with 12 metres for you, and don't worry about price. I'm sure we can negotiate something. Yeah, all good. Happy to help out, Chris. VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ.
Excellent. Oh well, thank you for that. Well, Terry, there's one problem knocked over. That was my major problem after sorting out the audio problem. For a long time, I didn't know why I was getting this residual distortion and why it was taking so much level to get the line input on my sound card to go to 0 dB. And the reason was one of the two stereo pairs input had blown and gone down to ground. So fairly soon I'll have to replace the sound card. Won't be a huge amount of money. The sound card that's in there is 2011 vintage, so it doesn't owe me anything. And it wasn't a hugely expensive sound card in the first place. The trouble is, between one piece of equipment and another, particularly if you have multiple earths around the shack, as I had, past tense, when you plug something into the sound card input, you can give it a hell of a belt voltage-wise, and I've no doubt that there probably is a FET input on that, and the FET probably simply shorts out. Anyway, with that, I'll hand it round to Dave, VK3ECG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and group VK3ECG. Good evening, Terry. You don't actually. I have to take the squelch off because your signal's a bit weak with me, but it's but fully readable once it's there. I'm not hearing any sort of crackling, Chris, I must say, but it's really quietening as Peter was saying. But that's just on. I presume it's on the radio, not coming through on the audio for YouTube. That certainly sounded quite nice as well. Yeah, and I've got a similar sort of arrangement with my 2 metre 70 centimetre, which is just one of the shorter versions of the Diamond. I think it's the one that's only about, I can't remember which number it is now, probably one of the 50 or 500 or something like that. I think it's just the one that's about a metre and a half or something like that. And it's just on a small angle piece of old TV antenna mast, actually, on the board just beneath the gutter, and only goes up about 4 or 5 feet. But with a metal roof, and it is a 2-story part of the house, so it's reasonably high up. But what it needs really is a proper mast, and I'm like you, I've only got sort of RG213 running to it, but it's not super old, that cable. It's probably, but it's good to myself. But I think that's going okay at the moment. I have been tempted to see whether I should try and get one of the 7000s or the 700H or one of those, or whatever one it is, with a little bit more gain. But it covers most of the sort of things repeaters around the place and so on. So I'm not particularly fast. It's a job for another time, I think. But I did notice that I think you put some pictures up, didn't you, Chris, of your the antenna having slipped down a bit and things like that. So I presume the idea is to take the whole thing down and then rewire and then refit the antenna and so on. And so it's not sort of it's clear of the mast and so on. So that's just one of those fiddly jobs of pulling antennas down and up again. I seem to lose my HF antenna from time to time with trees swaying, and I've got hopefully got enough slack in it, but every now and then something happens and a branch comes down across it, and or a bit of a tree snaps or something like that, and it comes down, and it's just one of those tedious job to put up again because it's quite long, about 48 metres or so long, and whilst it's not a terrible job, getting things up into the trees, I mean, I think I need to invest in a nice little drone or something like that to take wires up in the tree. I'm not sure that would be fully appreciated, but it would be a lot easier. I used to do a bit of archery actually, so I'm not actually bad with a bow and arrow, but I keep worrying about killing somebody at the far distant end if it comes off the end of the line. Plus the fact that I'm a bit scared of shooting stuff up with lines on arrows anyway, considering the poundage of some of the bows, things like that. Oh, well, something to play with anyway in the next few months. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML Group VK3ECG.
Okay. Incidentally, the crackling is only appearing on Terry and yourself. It's not appearing on Peter because Peter has a much stronger signal. So it's some low-level electrical discharge. Anybody who was watching the YouTube live stream would have seen me switching off one light after another in the shack to see if it was any of those. They're LEDs mostly, except one up there is a fluoro. But no effect on the noise. It's something external, and I suspect it's power line leak. For some time I've been unhappy with the performance of my antenna on 70 centimetres, and it's supposed to have more gain there than on 2. So it'll be interesting to see if the change of feed line makes much of a difference to it. But with 26-year-old RG213, I suspect the loss would be a lot more than 3 dB, even though it's only 12, maybe 15 metres. And I can route it, instead of coming in through the window on my right, which it has to go right round a loop round the house, I can take it in through the toilet window in the next room, which is about half the distance, because just outside the toilet window is the base of the antenna. All I have to do is knock a hole in the wall. I'm sure Prue won't be happy about that, but between you, me and the gatepost, if it's a choice between a long feed line or a slight hole in the wall, I think I'll take the latter. It's better than having a hole in the head. Now, what else was there? I don't know whether you people have seen the film On the Beach, 1959, made in Melbourne, but some of the scenes in that, after a theoretical nuclear holocaust that the film is about, show Melbourne streets completely deserted. It was apparently shot in the city in the days before there were any city apartments, 1959, on a Sunday in the wee hours, something like 5 or 6 a.m. And some of the city streets during the lockdown reminded me of On the Beach. What else here? Greg KWX. I'll just check on the text on there. Diamond X7000 will be N-type plug. No, it's not. I have a Diamond X7000 type P. There is the Diamond X7000N and there is the Diamond X7000P. And I have the PL259 version, unfortunately, which means that it's a bit dicey for 23 centimetres, but I don't operate 23 centimetres anyway. That's in response to VK Pirate there. So I need to get the CNT 400 with PL259 connectors on it. The only thing that's got me worried about that is CNT 400 cable has a single centre core conductor, about 1.2 millimetre diameter, fairly thick, and it's copper coated aluminium, and I don't know whether it'll solder. And there's a reply from Mark Harrison on the text. Hi Chris, remember the so-called UHF PL259 connector was invented when UHF was around 15 megahertz. Okay, at 6 metres, but I wouldn't recommend for anything higher. Well, I don't operate anything higher than 400 megs, but the fact that my radio has a PL259 socket on it and the antenna has a PL259 socket on it means that if I do go for an end connector, I'll have to have a converter plug, which will be even worse. So that's the thing there. John Young says, swarf from sheet metal work on aircraft has destroyed many very expensive pieces of avionics equipment. I can imagine that being the case, John Young, because I think they do buffing of the aluminium surface on the wings of many aircraft to make them smoother, and that must generate a lot of airborne dust. Years ago, God, 57 years ago, I went with a high school group in my first year of high school to tour the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation factory at Fisherman's Bend. And the OH&S there was a bit questionable. There were some rooms we walked through where the strong smell of paint solvent was so strong you could almost cut the atmosphere, and people who had to work in that environment day after day, it must have been much worse than smoking ever could be. Looking down the list here, Craig VK3CRG, who I mentioned earlier, is working at Channel 10. VK3ZGC tells me that Craig is now working for Bay FM 93.9 in Geelong, although it's fairly obvious he has a broadcasting background with the excellent delivery he does on his YouTube videos, and the fact that he started YouTube videos long before most of us did says something for his skills and background. I think that covers all of the queries on the live stream text. So I'll hand it over now to, I think, Dave, VK3ECG. Don't think there's anything else here I can talk about. Computer fan, silent, yeah. Footscray Cemetery. I'll throw that question at Dave as well. Any background on grave robbers? This gets back to the story of Frankenstein, doesn't it, Dave? VK3ECG and group. Mary Shelley. VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3ECG. I think actually it's Peter, actually. Peter, do you want to take it quickly? VK3ECG.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you take it, Dave, because I was going to ask you about grave robbing too, so take it, Dave. Yes, okay. Well, I've been present at a few exhumations, but I wouldn't have called it grave robbing. But in a sort of official capacity. But look, yeah, it certainly does happen, and we do get occasionally called about it. Often, I mean, I can't remember anything recently. I mean, I heard about the Footscray one, but I haven't had any. As I said, I haven't been around at work in the last few days, so I haven't heard of anything happening in that space. But normally we only get really involved if there's a question of, what's missing, and or if something is found elsewhere, what is it and what does it belong to. So that's the only sort of context in which we would get involved, although obviously we have been involved with some sensitive cases from time to time, and historically it's really some fascinating history. Obviously there was the original sort of anatomy dissection grave robbing that took place, which is the old anatomy men who used to dig up recent graves and then sell them to the anatomy schools and the medical schools and at that time, and that's the historical sort of framework of that. But the general business about stealing from corpses, which is has a technical term called ratting, don't ask me why, but it comes up from time to time, not just from graves, but obviously people handling and moving bodies from place to place as part of ordinary processes. But yeah, certainly is a sort of a strange issue, and I don't know, but I suspect fewer people are buried with a lot of expensive jewellery and so on, whereas and certainly in olden times people did, and often, things of a sentimental value which weren't being handed on to family would be buried with people. So, but I suspect it's less common today than it might have been in the past. But yeah, I mean, there are risks. I mean, there are hazards, and there's in fact some of the best descriptions of come out of that sort of anatomy days of what happened when bodies were moved and what they were like and things like that. But it was quite a valuable trade, and people moved bodies from place to place and sold them to the medical schools for anatomy teaching, and that was fairly almost normal practice. In fact, they brought special legislation in, I think, in Melbourne to prevent that happening, and brought in special anatomy legislation in the very early days to sort of address it and make for specific offences and things like that, because there were some legal issues around there being property in a body, which has always fascinated me, but that used to complicate issues for criminal behaviour. So it was dealt with on a moral ground, really, rather than a sort of straightforward criminal theft type of ground. Of course, if they stole an object, so what they would do is they would charge the people with stealing the shroud, because there was property in the shroud, therefore you could charge them with stealing it. But there was no property in a body, so you couldn't be charged with stealing that. There we are, back to you. VK3AML, the group VK3ECG.
That's an interesting theoretical analysis. Something that I wouldn't normally have come across. I know that occasionally in Canberra they've had trouble because the flood level of the Molonglo River, particularly with the construction of Lake Burley Griffin, is higher than the lowest level of the Queanbeyan Cemetery. And when there was a particularly bad flood, this is back in the 70s, I wasn't there at the time, but friends of mine from Canberra I worked with told me about it afterwards. The flood was sufficiently bad that one or two coffins did a floater and floated on down into Lake Burley Griffin, to the point where the police launch had to be sent out to literally rope in the coffins. And in the Canberra Times, one of the guys who brought the coffin in said, "Oh, it was really bad. One of the stiffs still had a head of red hair on him." I can't imagine a more bizarre job than being a policeman, having to do reports on a missing body which had already long since died. No doubt they have cold cases like that. I know my friend Roland Legg occasionally deals with that sort of thing. It's getting on. It's 12:15. Perhaps the next quarter hour or so we should think of winding it down. And in case anybody else comes on, perhaps I better hand it round to Terry, if you're still about with us, Terry. Any final comments or whatever? And if you could leave a pause for any other breakers. VK3 FTJS VK3AML. I think Terry might have dropped off the perch. Okay, it's round to Peter, VK3ACZ. Over to you, Pete, VK3ACZ, and the group VK3AML.
VK3AML and group VK3ACZ, and trust you, Chris, to think of the Mary Shelley side of things. that one, I guess in all my revulsion, I'd not really thought of good old Frankenstein, but there you go. Just wondering, a question for you still, Dave. Yes, you acknowledged, and I guessed you'd been at a few exhumations at various times and wouldn't have called it grave robbing by any means, of course, completely legal and legit and all that. But I'm wondering, first, can you hazard a guess at the motivation of somebody that would commit such a crime? And secondly, how unpleasant would it be? I mean, I can't guess the condition of bodies, and we don't even know how long they were lying in state. But yeah, they're my main queries: the possible motivation and how unpleasant the corpse would be in such a state. 3AML, 3ACZ.
Take it, Dave. You can answer that much more than I.
Yeah, from VK3CG. Well, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, I don't know the intention of people doing these things. One level, it could be have a constructive element, as you said, Chris, in terms of property. But for the vast majority of these, I think they're just antisocial behaviour. And obviously, where the grave has been recently dug, for example, then it's much easier to actively dig because you haven't got compacted soil and things like that. So whether it's just casual wanting to engage in a sort of disgraceful behaviour type of thing, I suppose. And at one level, there's a sort of desecration, there's a hurt for the family, though I suspect the various people doing this have very little regard for that. It's all in the heat of the moment, I suspect. As to the condition, well, it's going to depend totally on the timing, as you were saying, Peter, and to some extent whether there's embalming and the state of the wrapping systems and various things that they do. There's a whole different layers of different embalming practices, and they will obviously result in different effects. But yeah, some cases I've dealt with, you have a person that it doesn't really look very different, and all the way through to just almost dried or damp bones from cases that have been 100 years ago or more. And there's a sort of spectrum in between. And then of course for the older cases you've got the issue of has the coffin survived and has that collapsed, and with collapsing soil. So there are all kinds of little nuances that could come into it. But as to the intention of the people, I'm sure it's hugely variable, and a lot of it will just be simple opportunistic. Perhaps someone's drunk and whatever. There have been, however, some targeted ones in the past which have been far more problematic, particularly in relation to historical figures and things like that, where obviously there's been souvenir garning and things like that, and that actually happened. Some really interesting historical records in Melbourne of the old Melbourne jail, where obviously all the executed prisoners and convicted murderers who were executed there were buried in the jail's land and were not given back to the family for family burial. That was part of the whole process. And when they eventually closed that, and with the Melbourne Mechanics Institute and so on, Working Men's Institute and so on, they removed the bodies in the graves to Pentridge, and during that process apparently there was a lot of just crowds of people gathering while all these graves were dug up, and people went away with souvenirs, and they actually had to there was complaints in Parliament, and they had to call in special protection and police and everything like that. So it became quite a scandal in Melbourne at the time, actually, with the closure of the old Melbourne jail. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3ECG.
Was that the closure in 1929 where I believe Ned Kelly's body was initially exhumed?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that was a long time ago. Okay, I could probably look that up on Trove and find a record of it. My mother, who was born in 1912, could easily remember the original Melbourne graveyard cemetery, which is now under the asphalt of the car park mostly at Victoria Market. That whole area was the original Melbourne graveyard, and when they exhumed bodies from there to take to predominantly to take to Fawkerton Cemetery between 1917 and I think 1922, they only moved the bodies that were in marked graves, that is, with stone markers. But a lot of the pioneers who were buried there between 1840 and 1854 were only marked with wooden crosses, and by 1922 most of those had gone. So there are still, I believe, 9,000 bodies underneath the asphalt of Victoria Market, and the hottest area politically for that is the Aboriginal section of that cemetery, which has the remains of the last of the Yarra tribe. If they dig that up, can you imagine the political storm that'll occur with Aboriginal sacred attitudes? Sacred site attitudes, I mean. And I know where that section is. It's under, would you believe, a nut shop. It's the ultimate in desecration, I suppose you'd call it. But then the attitude to death in the 19th century, when that cemetery was founded and closed early in the 20th, was totally different to the attitude we have to the sacrosanct nature of graveyards now. I know that during the 1850s, for example, there were lots of graveyards around Hobart which were unceremoniously closed and built over. One in Albura Street which became a primary school, and there used to be steps from the footpath up to the primary school, and when they turned the steps over they found that the steps were old tombstones that had just been unceremoniously heaped up. Interesting story behind some graveyards, you know. VK3ACZ. We better start looking at a final, Peter, but I will see you on Monday anyway. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ. And thanks, Dave, for the answers to the questions. And probably a bit unfair asking you to guess on motivation when it could be anything from a severe case of, being a real sick puppy. But I can't help but reflect on the possible thoughts of the grieving family. It'd be vastly different, wouldn't it, if it was somebody that had been dead for 100 years, that maybe no one around who would care quite as much, but something more recent than that hardly bears thinking about. Anyway, I hope the system catches up with them is about all I can say. One of the most horrific things I've heard in recent times, though. But anyway, thoughts come to mind of things like the catacombs in Paris, where you go down and where they, what was it, the bodies were starting to leak into the water table in Paris there, so they got all the bones and stuck them in piles of, you walk past rows of skulls and rows of femurs all stacked up very neatly and all that. And then the St. Mickens in Dublin, that I looked at the 400-year-old, was it 3 or 4, I can't remember now, bodies that were 400 years old. Very contemplative it really was, being there. I didn't like the way they stacked up the coffins in one of the vaults there, because the one down the bottom weakened and then collapsed with the weight of 6 or more on top of it, and you could see bones sticking out from the crushed coffin at the bottom. But anyway, and hey, enough of this morbid stuff. I'll quickly relate to you my dumb stunt of the week. Haha. I got myself a 10-element 2-metre Yagi this week, with the intention of playing a bit of tropo-ducting over to VK7 or whatever I can on sideband when conditions allow in the future, and especially even going portable. So I decided to, I had a 5-metre mast, put the thing up. Didn't bother guying it because, hey, it was only up for a quick temporary look to see what the SWR was and all that. And it was going really well. I was so impressed. 1.5 megahertz wide. The SWR was under 1.3 to 1, and when all of a sudden I heard a strange noise, and I know what that noise is. So anyway, my 5 metre mast came crashing down, didn't it? And there I was with these brilliant elements all bent hopelessly out of shape. In fact, one was bent over 90 degrees, and I thought, crude aluminium, there's no way known this will straighten without snapping, and you know what? It did. So I haven't lost the antenna, it just has a few little dings in it that I'd have rather not had. But that's my stupid stunt of the week, and I'll make that my final, and just something to contemplate other than the gory nature of the stuff that I brought up a short while ago. But anyway, again, thanks as always for running your broadcast. I can see and appreciate the effort that you put in because there's editing involved, and yes, you did give a bit of a plug for a buddy company, but not to worry. I couldn't help but think, that'd be a nice little setup. I might look into that. But otherwise, thanks, Dave, for being there too. It's good to have our Saturday night get-together, and we missed you last week, Dave. And we'll hopefully do it all again next week if we all stay safe and look after each other. Anyway, good night and 7-3 to all. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
No worries, Peter. Always a pleasure to have you both on, and you too, Terry, if you're listening in the background there. And that over. There was virtually no crackle, so that sounded like power leak. It sounds like whatever insulator was arcing over some distance away must have stopped. What it really takes under these circumstances is a really decent shower of rain to clean the insulators off, which I suspect is the problem. And thank you so much for the offer of the CNT 400. It's the last thing I was expecting. I'll be interested to see what it looks like. Not as flexible as RG213, but then I don't need it to be. But I'll have to look into sealing the ends to the plugs on the ends with heat shrink. I've got some heat shrink of appropriate size for PL259 connectors. And it may require crimping, in which case I'll have to take it to somebody who knows how to use the crimping tool, who has the crimping tool. Okay, Dave, very nice to hear you on again after a little break, and I hope when I listen back to this recording, I hope that the level and the equalization and the distortion are very much closer to optimum than they have been in the past, thanks to the investment in the peak limiter, which a DJ store had told me was only going to come in March, and they rang me the 1st of February to say it had arrived completely unexpectedly. So in that case, the borrowed limiter that I have from Andrew Wright, VK3BK, can go back to Andrew only 2 weeks after the borrowing. I thought I'd have it for several months. And thank you, Andrew, if you're listening. Thank you very much for the loan. You got me out of a difficult couple of weeks there. So round to Dave for a final, perhaps. VK3ECG, I see we're just coming up. We're 15 seconds off 3 hours from the start at 9:30. VK3ECG and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and group, VK3ECG. Yes, well, I'm sorry to have lowered the tone. We seem to have sunk or whatever. But in terms of the conversations about the more morbid attachments, but yes, I mean, I think there's been there are always these sort of stories that are around from time to time, and I think the floods at New Orleans, and of course a lot of the cemeteries down in New Orleans and so on. that's why they have all the mausoleums, because they literally don't bury people. Everyone's above ground in the tombs, and so that's the way they get around the graveyards in sort of swampy lands and things like that. But yep, and these problems certainly do occur. Well, thanks very much, everyone. It's been great, and also fascinating to see some of the YouTube videos that I hadn't seen before. I've seen some of Tom's stuff, and which is really interesting. And but it's good to find a few other ones to have a look at. I must think about trying to improve my antenna systems a little bit, because I think I could do a little bit better, and my signal isn't that strong out there. I think I'm putting out about 50 or something like that. So I think something with obviously it would be interesting to have a beam. I don't have a beam or anything like that at the moment, just the collinear. But and that's, as I said, the gain on that is probably half what yours is, Chris. I think there's several in that range, of some of which do 23 centimetres, others are just 2 and 70, and they've got a little bit more gain into the same size than the one that does 23 as well. And yes, there's one with the PL259 and one with the end connector, and I suspect they just change the model numbers from time to time as to which one. I think I don't know. I think there's a couple with 23 as well. On the others, of the larger ones are just 2 and 70 with different connectors. So you know, at some stage, perhaps think about something like that, because this one is quite again, it's quite an old one. I've had it for a long time, and it only got put up in this current configuration about 3 or 4 years ago, and it hasn't got the greatest coax on it either. So there's probably a variety of ways in which I could improve things. Anyway, send these to everyone, and make it my final, and look forward to the next week. Speak to you later on. From VK3ECG, cheerio all.
Yeah, thanks, fellas. This is VK3AML, YouTube live streaming on VK3AML, 5 February 2022. If you search for that, you'll find the YouTube live stream, which, when I go off the air, it automatically is recorded up to YouTube and stays in circulation there. I'll just check my printed stuff on the text chat. Grave robbing was somewhat of a problem for the ancient Egyptians. Well, yes, but there's been a considerable time in which it could happen, like 3,500 years. Does that 2-meter radio have a noise reduction setting? No. It's an NBFM rig. It just has the normal limiter on the discriminator, that's all. And Dave 3ECG is in Eltham. I'm in Burwood East, and there's a considerable distance of dirt between the two of us, so I'm probably receiving him a bit by reflection. The signal isn't all that strong. Compression connector, but you need a tool for it. Yeah, somebody, when I mentioned that CNT 400 I'd need to put on a PL259 connector, he said bluntly, you can't put a PL259 connector onto CNT 400. And I thought to myself, just watch me. Anyway, with that, good night everybody on 2 meters, and we'll see you back again 9:30 p.m. Melbourne time next Saturday night, hopefully, for the next episode. And I'm kind of thinking that I should do a presentation on the usage of web-SDRs around the world, on the 2 major families of web-SDR, the University of Twente set and the Kiwi SDR group. Between the two of them, you can receive most parts of the world with very few exceptions. And the various web-SDR receivers are working off very variable antenna systems, some of which are hopelessly deaf and some are outstandingly sensitive, and I probably should do a list of the sensitive ones. Okay, with that, all the best. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima is now clear of 2 metres. And there doesn't seem to be any reply there. So thank you to all the people who appear on the text chat. John Young, Dave, of course, Dave Ranson, Terry Sims, VK3FTJS, Mick, Ham Radio and Life, Tom. I suspect Tom 3FTOM's in bed by now. Most people would be. 3ZGC, nice to speak to you. Chris Baird, lovely to see you there again. Who else is on there? L2 repeats. Dennis 1DKO in Canberra. Nice to see that we're getting into Canberra. And you probably have heard that thing about the flooding of the Queanbeyan Cemetery. It's a bit of a legendary thing in Canberra about Lake Burley Griffin. Who else? I think that's all. Sorry it got into a rather macabre ending there, but it's interesting to talk about what happens to people once they pop off the mortal coil occasionally, particularly as Dave Ranson has forensic experience. It's interesting to hear it from an expert in the field. And with that, as always, I'll wish everybody a very good night. I think the live stream has behaved itself for the 3 hours tonight, which is great. And the new audio arrangement seems to be excellent. What it does do, this automatic level control and peak limiter, it leaves me free of worrying about levels to think about what I'm going to say, which is more to the point. All the best, people. See you next week.